Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show, and I am glad that you're with me on the show. As I often point out, you could be anywhere, so I'm always appreciative that you end up here with me on this particular broadcast. Um, Obviously, there's been right much that has taken place today, or you could say last night, leading into today. The big thing being, of course, what is being called a terrorist attack on U.S. shores, specifically in specifically no suit. Yes, I know, I know. I sorry to disappoint. I have a busy day today, and I'm going to be bouncing around, so I'm not going to have time to change. Um, but I'm going to say an ISIS-inspired terror attack that took place in New Orleans. We're also hearing about a Cybertruck blowing up outside of Trump Hotel. There's that. Another shooting in New York. This is apparently, it seems like at some kind of club. I believe there were 15 people injured at the club. But the last reading that I had or that I have for the Colorado shooting is 15 dead. And what I mean by shooting is there were two things to take place. One, a truck plowed into just whoever it could plow into in New Orleans. This took place on Bourbon Street. Bourbon Street is probably one of the most famous streets in New Orleans and definitely one of the most famous streets in this country. And so you can imagine on New Year's, there's going to be a large number of people there. There are a large number of people there in general, let alone having celebrations during New Year's. And the man's name is Shamsud Din Jabbar. He was a former army guy. Apparently, he was still. In fact, let me just go into his information. I don't want to get any of this wrong. Right here, an army veteran who was, quote, hell bent, unquote, on killing as many people as possible, drove a rented pickup truck around a park police car serving as a barricade and plowed into a crowd in New York, New Year's revelers on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, leaving at least 15 dead and injuring dozens of others. Early Wednesday, city and federal officials said. Now, there's been a few things associated with this. For one, they're calling it ISIS inspired. And they're calling it ISIS inspired. And this is in some relation to what Joe Biden has put out in his speech on this issue. And apparently there was a flag in the truck that was supposedly affiliated with ISIS, or that at the very least they're saying is affiliated with ISIS. Also, apparently, videos that he put out on social media, this was something that the FBI had been looking into, where the FBI said that, again, it was on some level inspired by ISIS. Now, the reason I'm saying inspired is because it sounds like the man had a mental breakdown. That's what it sounds like. Apparently, he had a divorce. The businesses went belly up. Apparently, he was in real estate or something. Those went belly up. You have to read heavily into the article in order to find out about the divorce, because it's kind of like in one line or so. But that part is there. Plows into the crowd, gets out in army uniform, in body armor, with guns, gets into a shootout with the cops. 2 cops get injured. The man is killed on the scene. Just astonishing. Yeah, Shamsud Din Jabbar. And this is a picture of the man in question. This guy. Now, there are going to be a lot of people focusing on the ISIS part. And I guess they should. I mean, it was something that came up in it. So fair enough. This comes across like the guy was mentally ill. and latched on to the ISIS part. But again, I don't know. There's going to be an investigation. An investigation is effectively taking place. I would say it is somewhat of a bit rich that this guy is inspired by the same people who we put into power in Syria. I'm just pointing that out because mainstream media is not going to point that out. The same people who we are putting in power right now to run the Syrian government, Jelani, was part of ISIS. In fact, one of the leaders of ISIS. I mean, he went through the motley crew of organizations, Al Qaeda, ISIS, etc. But we are being told that that was a period in his past. And that even though that was in his past, he went through a head shopping phase. But that he has now evolved. And he has put his head shopping ways behind him. And because he is a suit, trimmed beard, that he is now a different type of guy and a different type of element. Okay, fair enough. If we're going to go heavy on this notion that this guy was motivated by a terror organization, then we should also own the fact that we are putting a terror organization in power right now. This is disgusting, to put it mildly. The notion that you are going to drive into a bunch of people. And by the way, the article points out that he initially thought or said to himself he was going to kill his own family, that he's just going to kill all of his family members. And then he thought to himself, it would be better off if he drives that truck and kill as many people as he possibly can. If you are that bad off, just kill yourself. Honestly, if you're that bad off, just kill yourself. The idea that you're going to take all of these people with you, it's just disgusting. There's no other way to put it. I'm pretty sure more eloquent words can be put for it. I don't even know if eloquent words are needed for it. A man has a mental breakdown. He says it's inspired by ISIS. Okay, fair enough. But the fact that he was going to kill his own family members make me think something else might have been going on there along with the inspiration. And he goes on a killing spree. It's that. We will see what the investigation leads. I mean, I was sitting here this morning going through the information just before coming on to figure out if there was any additional information associated with it. Simultaneously to this, a Tesla truck blows up outside of Trump Towers. Now, there's a question of whether or not these things are related. The reason there's a question of whether or not these things are related is A, it's a Tesla truck. B, it's in front of Trump Towers. C, this is happening at the exact same time that this was taking place in New Orleans, or let's say on the same day. Both people apparently ended up serving at the same military base. The feds don't believe that he was alone in this. So the feds have been looking further into it to see if there was anyone else affiliated with the person who did this. So right now, the investigation is ongoing without a clear, let's say, take on whether or not he acted alone or acted with someone else. Now, the reason this is weird to me is because initially he was going to kill his own family. And then he decided he was going to kill a bunch of other people. And so that's kind of a weird thing to be acting in coordination with somebody else, if that's indeed your motivation. But again, I don't know. All of this stuff is just happening. And we are getting our head around this case. It's very bizarre. It's very, very bizarre. It said we do not believe that Jabbar was solely responsible. Duncan said during the news conference on Wednesday afternoon, quote, "We are aggressively running down every lead, including those of his known associates. That's why we need the public's help. We're asking if anybody had any interaction with Shamsud Din Jabbar in the last 72 hours to contact us," unquote. This is what he was, the police, when they were discussing this case. Yeah, after mowing down numerous people over the 3-block stretch on the famed thoroughfare while firing shots into the crowd, the suspect, identified by sources as Shamsud Din Jabbar, allegedly got out of the truck wielding an assault rifle, opened fire on police officers. Law enforcement briefly engaged, briefly engaged in the incident. Officers returned fire, killing Jabbar. And again, just to be very clear, U.S. born citizen from Texas. So all of this stuff about him being an immigrant is nonsense. I want to go to my guests. We're joined with the one and only Mark Sloboda. Mark Sloboda is an international relations and security analyst. Mark, Happy New Year's. Welcome to the show, man. How you doing today?
Tomorrow, and everyone out there, Happy New Year's. Novum Godum.
Well, thank you.
Let's see what 2025 will bring us. Thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show.
Yeah, we started on a very bizarre morning for a 2025, considering I was just going over the terrorist inspired incident, as they're calling it. I mean, I think it's a little bit more complicated than terrorist inspired, but that's what they're going to latch on to in regards to the media. So there's that. It's just wild. Let me switch gears. Yeah, Happy New Year, Mark. Yeah, let me switch gears. So I wanted to get into what has been taking place abroad, and there are a few things. And the first thing I need to start with is the end of gas transit to Europe. And the reason I'm starting with this is because the way that the media is reporting this in the United States is just warped. They are effectively saying that Putin himself is stopping gas transit to Europe, missing the fact that Ukraine is the one that's making the choice to do so. Now, I guess my first question would be, do you believe that this is being pushed by the U.S., considering that the main states this is going to hurt the most, Hungary and Slovakia? But give me your take on this. And I guess let me piggyback on this too. How is this going to affect Europe in general?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's no secret that the Europe has been slowly decoupling themselves, whatever the painful cost to their own economies, from Russian energy supply. Excuse me. Since 2022, there have long been geopolitical forces in the Europe who have wanted Europe completely separated from Russia in this respect, no matter the cost to their own economies. And the benefit to the European economies of relatively cheap, reliable, large quantity gas and oil delivered by pipeline to Europe from Russia was a competitive advantage to their economies that they have now longly lost. However, this has been phased, and certainly part of this was the U.S. destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines already almost a couple of years ago. But this entire time, there has been one pipeline through Ukraine, the Druzhba or Friendship pipeline, that has continued flowing through pipelines in Ukraine into Central and Southeast Europe. It was heading primarily to Slovakia and Hungary, but also Serbia, Austria, Italy, and Moldova as well. And this, was very substantial to those economies. And this was something that Hungary and Slovakia fought for with the imposition of sanctions and this divestment of energy, was that their energy supply wasn't affected. They would go along with this as long as their economies weren't the ones on the line, because they didn't really agree with this whole proxy war business in the first place. And they weren't willing to give up. They weren't willing to take the economic damage onto themselves of energy that would cost 2 or 3 times as much, which has led to what numerous Western publications have headlined as the deindustrialization of Germany, the heart, the pumping heart of Europe's economy in the first place. But there has long, of course, been political and geopolitical differences between Hungary and then Slovakia, with the election of Prime Minister Robert Fico there, who have dissented from the EU-US foreign policy orthodoxy of supporting the Kiev regime and being, in a de facto war with Russia. They have wanted no part of that. But this relied on a contract, right? The transit of gas through pipelines built during the Soviet Union, through this Druzhba pipeline, was by contract. And it has to be said that as a result of this contract, Ukraine also was taking energy out of this pipeline, and they received fees, right, for the transit of the gas through this country. They were paid by Gazprom all during this time. So they have refused to renew or extend the existing contracts, which means that by January 1st, Gazprom was forced before January 1st of this year, Gazprom was forced to halt gas supplies. Without any contract, any gas they sent would just be taken by Ukraine, and that's it. So, I mean, there was nothing they can do. And Ukraine was quite proud of this. They called this a historical moment where they are, in effect, forcing Europe to do without Russian energy, whether Europe agrees with this or not. Now, the Prime Minister of Slovakia is Robert Fico. He, for one, is not taking this standing down, sitting down. He just a couple of weeks ago, he was in Moscow. He came, physically himself to speak with Putin, and there's no question that this was a violation of the orthodoxy that has existed since 2022, that European leaders don't meet or speak with Putin, violated first by Viktor Orban, of course, but now by Robert Fico as well. And Robert Fico has vowed to cut Slovak electricity supply to Ukraine because with Russia's destruction of the Kiev regime's electrical infrastructure, including their generative capacity, that is one of the ways, the primary way that the Kiev regime has managed to keep the lights on is Europe is just giving them energy through electrical network that has been rigged up to accept electricity from that area. And Slovakia has been probably the single biggest contributor in that regard. Hungary only slightly behind that. And here, both of those countries have, as they see it, are being stabbed in the back by the Kiev regime in Ukraine. We're giving you electricity and you're cutting off our energy, from Russia. Robert Fico has vowed to cut off the electricity supply in response. Now, certainly the U.S. wants this and benefits from this, right? Their argument is, well, you can just buy U.S. LNG. Right? That no matter how 3-4 times more expensive it was, considering the costs that it takes to, turn the gas to liquid form, transit it across the Atlantic Ocean, and then return it to from a liquid form and put into a pipeline network where it can be used. It's not actually such an easy thing to do, and it is vastly more expensive than Russian gas. And not only that, it cannot be supplied in anything like the quantities that Russian gas has been up until now, right? So both the cost and the inability to actually meet the demand is the situation here. And certainly the U.S. has been pushing this. This has actually been a pet project of the U.S. Head of the Department of War. I'm sorry, the Secretary of State. I think that's what Americans call it, Anthony Blinken.
Same difference.
Yeah,
Same
in the early 1980s, he wrote a book, presumably part of his thesis project. I believe it's called Allies versus Allies. And it is about the these pipelines when they were built, and U.S. opposition to the supply of Russian or then Soviet, ally versus ally. Yeah, America, Europe, and the Siberian pipelines. Siberian pipeline crisis. This was written by Anthony Blinken back in the early 80s. You can actually get it on Amazon if you're really into that. But you can see that this has been a geopolitical goal of, shall we say, neocon forces in the United States to make Europe entirely separate from Russia and entirely dependent on them. This has been their goal for a long time. So there's no question. The Kiev regime, no matter how much they're going to suffer for this, they also see it as, something that they are entitled to, this incredible sense of entitlement that the Kiev regime. How dare you continue to receive energy to conduct trade with Russia? You don't have that right. We are in a war with Russia, and you are a part of that because NATO and the EU are part of that. Therefore, Hungary and Slovakia, whether you agree with it or not, we're not giving you a choice in that regard. Again, no matter the damage done to themselves, because at this point, things are so bad for them and there's so little prospect of turning it around on the battlefield that they're just flailing around doing anything they can, cutting off energy supplies, assassinations, terror attacks, whatever they can at this point. It's a result of panic and desperation, and cutting off. Now, doubtless this will cut into Gazprom's bottom line. There's no question about this, because this isn't a case where this gas can easily be rerouted, right, to other customers, right? It's not so easy, to send gas from Europe. That's actually what the whole power, the idea of what the plans for the construction for the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline are, right? This is a second gas pipeline that is supposed to go from Russia to China, this one to cut through Mongolia. And this one would actually tap the Yamal gas fields that currently go to Europe. But plans, as far as I know, they haven't reached a final deal on it. And, although supposedly they're very close, and the construction of it, would still be several years away. This is going to cut into Gazprom's bottom line, but eventually, they will come up with a way to get this gas to market. It just won't be going to Europe. And this is going to push global energy prices up for everybody, right? And however much Russia loses in revenue in the short to medium term from, the supply, they're going to simply make up in higher prices. So that's the problem all along that has been. This is a finite commodity. Everyone in the world needs it, and there's so many suppliers of it. And when you shake up the distribution, the existing distribution, that's going to raise prices for everyone. And Russian gas will eventually go back to market, but because the disruption of the existing distribution agreements, that's going to, cause things to go up, because now Europe is going to be bidding for other gas that was going elsewhere, right? So that's going to be putting prices up. Again, in the end result, it's not going to cause a type of crippling damage to the Russian economy, because the result is the prices that goes up, and Russia will simply reap more profit on less gas, and so far that has always ended up in Russia's favor throughout this the course of this economic war by the West on Russia. There's still one pipeline that is bringing gas to Europe from Russia, and that is Turk Stream. And that flows through Turkey, and Erdogan is very happy and protective of that network, right? Because it goes through Turkey, and Turkey, pushes in 5% of gas from somewhere else. Suddenly, it's not Russian gas, right? That's the magic formula that Europeans pretend themselves, right? But we do know, I mean, we've received reports and claims credible from Ukrainian media and officials. They have tried to blow up they had plans to blow up Turk Stream already, and this was called off. So
were those leaks real, by the way? Because there was a communication that was leaked between
yes.
I'm not going to give the names of the people because I don't exactly remember, but there was two higher ups where they were like, Turkey, Erdogan is not going to forgive us for this.
Yes.
I wasn't sure if it was real. I didn't play it.
It's entirely credible and believable. I mean, if you were in the Kiev regime's shoes, of course you would want this as well. And there's Erdogan in Turkey has played an ambiguous role, playing both sides off each other to what Erdogan perceives as Turkey's benefit throughout this, right? They've been supplying plenty of weapons to the Kiev regime in Ukraine all through the course of this conflict. Bayraktars, APCs, artillery shells, lots of things they've been supplying to the Kiev regime. They've even been building them naval ships, right? Small ships, but they've been building them warships. Actually, they've finished the construction of the second one. So complicated. At the same time, Turkey has never agreed to Western sanctions against Russia, and when the U.S. has been playing a game of punishing Turkish companies and Turkish banks, a NATO ally, for continuing to trade with Russia. So it becomes a game of kind of sanction whack-a-mole. And this has caused, a tense relationship, an even tenser relationship between Turkey and the United States, and to a lesser extent Europe over this whole affair. But, this is classic Erdogan, right? He's benefiting coming and going, and as he sees it. And certainly he wants Turk Stream to continue and probably to be expanded. I'm sure he would like that. The Kiev regime may have other ideas in this regard, but everyone is so afraid, including Putin, Russia, the Kremlin, of angering Turkey and pushing them completely into the opposite camp, that no one really does anything. I mean, Erdogan just overthrew the Russian and Iranian protected Syrian government with literal Al-Qaeda, on the ground. And Russia, the Russian state media, just ignores it. They just pretend it's not happening, right? That's not what happened. They're very quiet about it. In fact, even Putin has, in a speech, claimed that the biggest beneficiary of what happened in Syria is Israel. And certainly, I mean, you can argue that Israel has benefited in certain ways, and other ways you could argue the opposite. But I mean, that's like ignoring the elephant in the room, the fact of Erdogan's neo-Ottoman Empire, because we don't want to sour relations with Turkey. And for Russia, on top of the substantial economic relations, the most important factor is that Turkey controls access to the Black Sea through the Dardanelles Straits with the Montreux Convention. And according to that convention, right, non-littoral states can only have one warship at a time in the Black Sea, and that obviously can't be an aircraft carrier. So basically, he keeps the rest of NATO off of Russia's back, because otherwise the British and the French would be loving to recreate the fucking Crimean War of 1850s all over again, right? Britain has been very hot on attacks on Crimea. This Admiral Radikin that has been planning out all of these failed Ukrainian attacks in the south there. So it's just too important a geopolitical pivot point at this time. It doesn't mean that Russia is happy. It doesn't mean that Putin and Erdogan are friends. Is that the Kremlin is seething inside and smiling and saying, there's no problem. Revenge is a dish best cold.
Frenemies,
once
man.
NATO is dealt with, the rest of NATO is dealt with, then if Erdogan is still alive at that point, his time will come, right? But at this point, the Kremlin isn't even criticizing Turkey.
Grin and bear it. Grin and bear it.
Which is no surprise. I mean, there are American politicians, not in the current government, American military personnel, generals, that have openly called for that the U.S. may have to consider killing Turkish troops in Syria if they start overtly attacking the Kurds in the U.S. Illegal occupation zone in the east of Syria. That's a very tense relationship right now. That was a three-way Mexican standoff, right? Yeah. Between the Syrian government, Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah in 2/3 of the country. Turkey, Al-Qaeda, and the other 31 flavors of jihad in all across northern Syria and Idlib. And then the U.S., and the YPG, the Kurdish YPG, rebranded as the Syrian Democratic Forces in the East. Well, now, through a brilliant checkmate maneuver, the entire Syrian government, Russia and Iran, has been taken off the board by this action of buying out the Syrian military and officials, and the Syrian government has fallen, and a Turkish proxy, Al-Qaeda, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, has taken control of most of Syria. But Israel has kind of entered into the fray as kind of a lesser third party now. So it's still a three-way standoff. Well, I don't know if you can really consider Israel and the U.S. to be different sides in this. Discrete sides, but not different sides. But the standoff between the U.S. and the Kurds, and now the Turks and Al-Qaeda, continues. And God help the Syrian ethnic minorities and the religious minorities that are caught in the middle of all of this. But,
I do want to get to that, because, okay, before I get to that real quick, I guess this could be a yes or no. Does somebody try to whack Assad? The reporting, there's reporting that has been floating around social media that somebody tried to assassinate Assad, that he got violently ill and everything else after eating something. Again, I don't take this stuff to be credible.
Is this in Moscow?
Yes, apparently in Moscow.
Yeah, I have not heard that yet. I have not heard that yet, but
well, that has been floating around social media. I wanted to knock
people have been trying to kill Assad for so long. I would certainly not be surprised if those attempts continue, even with him in Moscow. No, I would not.
Before I move from Moscow, I have to get this one. As we start 2025, what is the status of the war up to this point? I mean, the Western media, they're reporting
which war. Which war? The Syrian war, or the Israel-Gaza war, or the
Ukraine?
The Ukraine war.
Wars are spreading all over. No, the Ukraine war. I mean, at the very least, we should get an update on where we began. Not where we began, but where we start the 2025 year. And then I want to go to Syria, because you're right. Syria has gotten so much more complicated with so many sides that are in Syria, because, Russia is still in Syria currently. And so there's still that, where HTS is saying they want Russia as a stabilizing influence. I don't think Russia. I think Russia is well in the plans of removing those bases. They're talking of converting those bases to humanitarian bases,
right?
Hmm.
Which means they would stop functioning as military bases. And everything I've seen is that Russia is slowly but surely transferring military equipment and personnel from, at least the personnel that matters, from this Syrian bases, Khmeimim and Tartus, the naval base, to Libya, which I also have questions about, but that's neither here nor there. But
Well,
Russia does not want to give leverage,
to Erdogan.
more leverage to Turkey and leverage to Al Qaeda over them. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham in Syria, right? They don't want those bases to be attacked and potentially overrun while they're still in the process. We saw what happened when the U.S. was retreating from Afghanistan. These frenzied last minutes, people frantically trying to get on airplanes, tons of military equipment left behind, right? That Russia doesn't want to be in that situation. So they want to pull out, saving as much as they can and with their dignity, in as much as they can intact in the process. But I really doubt. I mean, it's not impossible, but I very much doubt that Russia long-term wants to give that amount of leverage to continue those positions there. I mean, they have their benefits besides just military. I mean, listening posts, radar, powerful surveillance activities, that are vitas for Russia's, national strategic defense as well. So there's lots of things to consider there, but ultimately, I cannot imagine that Russia will so sanguinely accept a Turkish and U.S. backed Al Qaeda, and continue to have their bases there. I think they're only there short.
Yeah,
but
they could be attacked by terrorists. I mean, there was reporting that the U.S. and the U.K. were trying to push effectively terrorists to attack the Russian base because they don't want them there.
Yeah,
in the first place.
And the EU has been basically saying outright to the head of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham Jalani that if you want our sanctions removed, you kick the Russians out. So, and again, those orders, I mean, the idea that Russia could stay, I mean, the words may be being said by Jalani, but the puppeteer behind Jalani is Erdogan, right? And Erdogan has his own interests. He doesn't want to tee off Russia any further than he has already done. And he may want Russia there as a hedge against the Americans and the Israelis, but it doesn't mean that Russia wants to now be put in that position either. So it's not impossible, but I don't think, I think in the medium term, we'll see Russia either repurpose those bases to humanitarian. That may be a way for them to say they're not completely pulling out of Syria, but they will cease to have most military functions. That it will be, become, because all this time Russia has been supplying, the last few years, Russia has been supplying Syria with wheat, with food, with their wheat fields occupied by the U.S., and Iran has been supplying them with energy. Oil, not enough, it must be said. I mean, Damascus sometimes only had 4 hours of electricity a day, which is, that set the whole context for the ability to buy out the generals, top officers, and local administration officials in Syria, because the economic situation, I had my eyes focused on Ukraine. I think pretty much no one saw this coming. I don't know anyone who predicted this, but we didn't really have an idea, except in retrospect, from afar, how bad the economic sanctions and the U.S. occupation of Syria's oil and wheat resources in the east had hollowed out the Syrian economy and led to, I mean, their economy in 2024 was 15% of what it had been back in 2010.
Wow, that is hard to wrap your head around. That much contraction.
Yeah, that's how bad it is.
Wow.
So whatever Russia and Iran were doing, it just simply wasn't enough to support the Syrian economy.
I want to move to Syria Well, in fact, while we're talking about Syria, might as well stay here and I'll go back to Ukraine before we end the conversation. Um, I am fascinated by the dynamics that are taking place on the ground in Syria right now. There's been reporting that I actually believe, I think Israel is correct on this, that there was communication between Erdogan and Israel as this overthrow of the Syrian government took place. That basically there was communications back and forth. And Erdogan is like, "Oh, that's outrageous. I would never talk to the Zionists and blah 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 blah." Even though Jelani seems to be less interested in Israel's bombing, or for that matter, theft of territory, even to the point where they're occupying more, and this kind of military governorship in some of these areas that Israel has effectively stolen and continued to occupy. Anytime this is brought up to Jelani, he has nothing to say about it. If you bring it up to anybody in his government, there's nothing to say about it. He's just quiet as can be as Israel attacks Damascus and destroys and denudes the country. Then there was a communication where Jelani comes out and says, "I avoided a larger war." And effectively that Israel would have been attacked and it would have forced Turkey, humiliated Turkey, where they would have had to work with basically the forces that were going against Israel, something they didn't necessarily want to do. And he's saying this openly, like just, granted, he's saying it in Arabic, but all things being equal, he's saying it openly. People can speak Arabic and they can record what he's saying. This is pretty astonishing. I have a hard time believing that it's not true. Give me your take on this. I mean, I know Erdogan is going to disagree with this and say, "Oh, this didn't happen. This didn't happen." But he also is not taking credit for backing the jihadists as they've overthrown the Syrian government. So,
first of all, it has to be said that Israel, besides expanding their zone of control, of occupation of southern Syria to a limited degree, right, that sees the entirety of the Golan Heights and some additional area. They're not going to take Damascus or something like that. The last thing they need is to have a few million more Arabs that don't want them there under occupation. Right? That's what they're. But their airstrikes are primarily concerned about destroying Syria's military equipment. Right, much of it of Russian origin, some Iranian as well. In particular, the air defense, and they're quite happy to not have to deal with the Syrian air defense. It now opens up all sorts of new avenues for attack on Iran. Right, but it has to be said first and foremost that Russia is actually probably pretty okay with that. In fact, they may even be helping Israel in that regard because the situation has completely turned. And any Russian or other military equipment in Syria is either going to be then controlled by Al-Qaeda. And Russia really doesn't want an Al-Qaeda fleet in the Mediterranean, no matter how small, right? Air units, air defense units that can bring down, jets, civilian aircraft quite easily, everything, right? And everything else that is there involved. So Russia, and the other option is that Erdogan gets a hold of it, and that doesn't please Russia anymore at this point. And the third option is the U.S. and Europe have been trying to buy as much of it up as they can to provide to Ukraine, because a lot of it is Soviet legacy equipment that Ukraine readily already knows how to operate and use and maintain. So far better for Russia at this point to see all of that destroyed, because things have changed, in such tectonic geopolitical aftershocks that are occurring there still. Now, what has Turkey ever done against Israel under Erdogan's control? I'm not talking the bluster and the rhetoric and the noise, which is part of his domestic and to some extent even his posturing for the rest of the Arab and Muslim world, right? But Turkey has never done anything against Israel, and that's not going to change. And I have no doubt believing that maybe Erdogan and Netanyahu didn't talk during all of this, but to think that Turkish and Israeli intelligence and militaries weren't coordinating is really naive, right? It's facile. So, of course, there was a degree of coordination there. Maybe that occurred even through the United States, But regardless, there was still tacit agreements there. And that's why Turkey's proxy, Al-Qaeda, now in control of Damascus, is not going to do anything against Israel either, right? Yeah. If anything, Erdogan would be more concerned with driving the Americans by whatever way possible out of East Syria, because he would first of all, he wants the Kurds gone. Second of all, he would like to be in control of Syria's oil and wheat fields, right? Because now he's bought Syria, through his proxy, and he may find that Syria is too much for him to for the Neo-Ottoman Empire to safely digest at this point, right?
Which is exactly what I want to get into, because right now the U.S. seems to be putting in a lot of military equipment back into Syria. They were saying that some of the largest
it was a surprise to us that we suddenly have 2,000 more troops there than we were letting on. How did that happen?
We only had 900.
It had nothing to do with us knowing the Syrian government was going to fall. They just happened to be appearing there. We don't know how at the same time. It's so
and so the reporting is a huge number of shipments, huge number of vehicles and everything else that's there. Now the Kurds have been screaming for help, even to the point of begging the Israelis to say, hey, help us out. You're a powerful force in the region. Where Israel is like, we don't want to piss off Turkey. We don't know if we want to get involved in that. And so it seems that Blinken was going to try to have these kind of communications to say, hey, calm down your group. We know it's you. Chill out on killing the Kurds. And everyone's like, hey, Blinken comes back, so we made a deal. That deal falls apart immediately. And more ground is lost by the Kurds.
As far as Turkey is concerned, the U.S. is supporting terrorists all of this time, because that's what they consider the YPG to be. Right now, the U.S., it must be said, Russia, much of the rest of the world doesn't really consider the Kurds, in particular the YPG, to be terrorists, right? So Erdogan, though, the YPG are terrorists, and Al-Qaeda is not a terrorist. So you have to watch the usage of this word terrorist in the two different sides and understand that. And all of this time before with Russia and Iran, everyone was saying the word terrorist, and everyone was meaning someone different.
Yes, all relative. Yeah, in this case. But I guess my point is, this is clearly coming to a head where Erdogan wants to push the U.S. because he wants to make Syria whole. When Jelani says we want to make it whole, okay, well, what are they talking about? Are they talking about the U.S. occupation?
I don't expect a big push. I got to say that. I think he will do the turning up the boiling water and slowly make things more and more uncomfortable. And if a few jihadi groups, that aren't firmly under Jelani or Erdogan's control start attacking U.S. military bases in Syria, what can we do, right?
Yeah.
That will be.
We don't have anything to do with this. This is outrageous. I can't believe they're doing that. Who could have known, et cetera, et cetera. Just wow.
That's what happened. It will be slow rather than quick, I think.
Okay, so it's almost like this just kind of, because from my point of view, Turkey is surrounding them in this case. In one case, you have Turkey itself, and you have the terrorist groups that are basically backed by Turkey, all putting pressure on the Kurds, with the U.S. seeming to be putting more forces in to defend their stake in that country. Am I understanding this right, my context?
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of things at play. And remember that the Kurdish groups in Iraq are supported both by the U.S. and Israel. They are completely politically separate from the Kurdish groups in Syria, right? The Kurdish groups in Iraq are essentially a giant crime family that owe patronage to the United States, right? And they don't like the YPG. They don't like their at least formerly leftist politics. I don't even know what they actually believe anymore, to be perfectly honest. But they don't get along. And Turkey has had a operating relationship with the Kurds in Iraq as well. So it's a very complicated situation there, right? Iran, Iraq, and Syria for a long time, and Turkey, right? They all have a degree of Kurdish population. Often those Kurds are politically separate, right? But they don't no one wants to give up part of their territory to create a Kurdish state,
Right.
under the the European ideology of
Kurdistan. Yeah.
nationalism. Yeah. So but it's a very complicated situation. And again, when you say words like Kurds, it's not a blanket term. You have to say which Kurds, in which country, following which political ideology, and which networks of patronage that they owe fealty to. It's a very complex situation. There are even Kurds, even if they are a minority in Turkey, who are aligned with the Turkish government in Ankara, right? Even if they're a minority. So it's a very complicated situation.
Do you expect? So right now there have been the killing of Alawites, Christians. There have been, I mean, for all intents and purposes, atrocities that are being committed against these groups. Do you expect a backlash by these groups? Meaning, because you're taking a country that went from religious freedom, women could be on the beach with bikinis, men can walk around with their swimming trunks. If you want to wear earrings, God bless you. And we have one God, that God is Allah. And it's our brand of Allah, no other God. It becomes that. And I can't imagine, if I was living in Richmond, Virginia, and all of a sudden you have one God. That would be mind-blowing. And you can imagine that with the amount of atrocities and the crimes that are being committed, that maybe these groups develop, let's say, a resistance force. Do you expect something like that? Yeah.
It's already happening. It's already happening in Latakia, the Alawite majority coastline, right? Or where the area where the Russian military bases are, that there is already a resistance taking military action, right? Maybe not huge at this point, right?
Resistance.
But they are, as far as I understand, the core of them at least is the remnants of the Tiger forces, which is what was the Syrian Arab Army's elite troops, one of the ones that were actually fighting and not, standing down, throwing down their weapons and uniforms and running away. And there are reports that Assad's younger brother is involved in this as well, whom is an entirely different creature than Assad was, and who served himself in the military. So how big this will get, well, that entirely depends on outside patronage. They can't survive on their own against a Turkish and Al Qaeda occupation long term. But we'll have to see how things develop.
Would they find a box of, let's say, guns under a pile of bricks?
Sure.
With a wink and a nod.
I'm sure as Assad was fleeing to Moscow, that they were already taking control of secret stores of arms and whatnot. I'm sure that is a process that continues. Now, how long they can keep this up, how many people they will get, a lot of that depends on how repressive Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is, and how forcing of their Salafist and Islamist religious and political ideologies they are, how much they force this on the rest of the Syrian population. If they're smart, it will be something that they do gradually, right? That they don't come out the gates, and because the longer the more gradually they push it, the less overt resistance there will be. And that seems to me to be what they're doing. There is lots of massacres and abuses and torture and everything else going on by various uncontrolled jihadi forces involved in the revolution, right? But it's not officially coming from the nascent Jolani Hayat Tahrir al-Sham regime, which is not to say that it's not happening, and not to say they don't know that it's happening, but they're not systemically taking credit and charge for it at this point. But I have no doubt that it will continue.
I got to get one last question on this. So apparently Jelani is saying, well, he has a different name now that he is, head of state. They
his real name, actually, because the funny thing about this, Al-Jelani,
That's like
I
a war
believe,
name, right?
yeah, that's a war name, but it's a reference to where he's from,
Okay.
the Golan. So
Oh,
the Golan Heights that Israel just seized control of, himself being from the Golan, he's playing mum and saying nothing against or about, which is
just fascinating.
is
Just utterly fascinating. I mean, even the Erdogan thing, right? He's like, Netanyahu is Hitler while working with that same Hitler to carve up Syria. Like all of these, the political entanglements are just fascinating. He is trying to get all of these groups to put down their weapons for obvious reasons, right? I've taken the government. All of you now need to chill out. We need to get rid of these guns. We need to get all of these people under the new Syrian army, as we call it.
so.
Do you think these groups are really going to do that?
Jihadis that have known nothing for war, and many of them come from Eastern
Elsewhere.
China, from Chechnya, from Dagestan, from all over the West, from everywhere, right? Thousands and thousands of foreign jihadis, as well as the Turkish and Syrian ones. They've known nothing but war for well over a decade now. And to think that they're just going to give all of that up and return to, I don't know, selling shawarma in the streets or carpets, or I mean, that's just, it does not happen that way in any context, much less with this situation. So the Syrian war, right, has not stopped. It has simply changed. That is all that has happened. There will be no peace for Syria in, well, certainly not the short to medium term, probably not the long term. I think ultimately the conflict in Syria will continue in one form or another, and that it will start to further devolve, further factionalize and fracture into different pieces. And it will be a story that Syria was, the Humpty Dumpty that fell off the wall, and all the hegemon and neo-Ottoman forces, couldn't put it back together again.
Wow. I got to get to Russia before we close. Where do we stand currently on the battlefield in Russia? It seems that if I'm reading Western media, Russia is either killing or pushing out any Ukrainian that just so happened to be in Kursk. And where do we stand on the battlefield in and of itself in regards to the Donbass proper?
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, on the non-battlefield side, right, all the headlines and the focus is on the idea that Trump is going to be pushing us for a ceasefire, and the response already that Russia's, no, we're not interested, right? And already the Financial Times is running articles trying to push Trump. Oh, you've got to show. Putin says no. Putin is allied with the mullahs in Iran and the Chinese Communist Party, and he said no to you. You have to show strength. You have to escalate to de-escalate, right? Things that I said back on the day after the election, right? That would be, where things would inevitably end up. On top of this, this big economic shift, primarily for Europe, with the oil cutoff and the repercussions that will cause, in Slovakia and Hungary and others, lashing out back against Kiev, and long-range strikes that are taking place back and forth. There have been very large attempted Kiev regime drone attacks over the holidays, over the last few. You haven't heard much about them because they haven't been very successful. A few hits, out of hundreds launched, that sort of thing, which is already par for the course, and larger Russian missile and drone attacks in response. That's all something that is continuing on essentially a daily basis. But on the battlefield, Russia has now taken Karahava. I don't think there's any real question about this. This is the second to last of these supply lines in southern Donbass. I don't believe the Russian Ministry of Defense has officially announced it yet, but everyone already knows that the Karahava has finally been taken. And that sets up what is going on. Russia is moving to not take Pokrovsk on directly, but to lay siege to it and cut off its supply lines, to flank it. and then to slowly start to cut it in multiple directions. And they're having I would say some pretty rapid success, considering the scope of the territory. And what all this means, two big things. One, with Karahova fallen, even the possibility that the Kiev regime could reach Donetsk city with artillery other than the HIMARS is now gone. Right? They shelled Donetsk city since 2014. Right? Well, that is now finally over, except with HIMARS. Right? That's the one thing that they could still reach it with, in which case you might as well say it's the U.S. bombing Donetsk city, because we know that they approve and provide the targeting for every single HIMARS strike, because the New York Times told us so. Whether with a normal HIMARS rockets or the ATACMS, it's still the same. So that's an important, right? Donetsk had a new year free of artillery shelling, which is something for the people there in the Donbass to celebrate. Other than that, of course, Russia, now that they've taken Karahova, and more especially once Pokrovsk is dealt with in the coming months, there's nothing really all the way to the Dnieper. It's pretty much open steppe. There's nothing geographical, topography, no big urban centers until you reach the bank of the Dnieper River. There you have Dnipropetrovsk and Mirnograd, but they all that distance in between, there's nothing there. So Russia is at this point a few kilometers away from entering the Dnipropetrovsk region in what will be essentially undefended steppe. So if Russia wants to move west, they will be able to. In the north, Russia is making the slow progress still in Chasiv Yar and Toretsk, two battles that have continued on forever, showing that the Kiev regime can still hold on toughly, right? Losing just a few hundred meters, a street a day, that sort of thing. Those fights, Russia is still grinding on and making progress, but it has been a rather lengthy affair. Same thing, even more so in Seversk. But by the spring, Russia will have finished up or be finishing up Pokrovsk and moving on this last major defensive line in the Donbass, which is the Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Konstantinovka line, which means on the battlefield by the end of 2025 at the latest, Donbass should be fully liberated.
Wow.
Right? Which you might say, wow, but if you had said back in 2022 that Russia won't fully take the Donbass until 2025, there's a lot of people who, would have scoffed that the Russian advance would be that slow.
It's hard fighting.
Hard fighting. And again, that's because NATO has entirely been bent.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah.
In the north, Russia is probably within 2 or 3 months away of closing up the Kursk incursion point. They continue to take ground, and the Suja pocket, because now it's less of an incursion zone and more a pocket that is slowly being strangled in Suja. That is something that is going to be pushed. But there is the potential for both sides to launch different offensives in the remaining months of the winter. Look for that to happen, because the Kiev regime has received large numbers of military vehicles and now armaments to go with them. Artillery shells, U.S. Strikers in the hundreds, Australian older Abrams tanks, lots of things that we haven't seen on the battlefield yet, which means they're being prepped for an offensive. So whether that is towards Bryansk or the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant or Moldova or Belgorod or somewhere, they're not done yet. They're going to make another suicide Hail Mary pass offensive that they've got in their heads that before negotiations begin, they want to create some new facts on the ground, blah, blah, blah. Never ignoring the fact that Russia is basically saying, look, we'll talk, but we're not interested in any ceasefire except for on our terms. We're not interested in any compromise. And no one in the US or Kiev is paying any attention to what Russia is saying, which is fair enough because Russia is not only keeping an ear on what they're saying, and they're focused on achieving results on the battlefield, which is where they believe that this conflict will ultimately be decided, which is almost certainly true, however long that end game is into the future.
Mark, man, I always appreciate you. Thank you for staying a bit longer. There was a lot to get to. I feel like I haven't talked to you in a while, especially over the new year, but there's a lot to get to, and the world has become far more complicated, man. And so I really appreciate you giving me your time. And look, in general,
the world has always been complicated. We're just starting to realize how complicated
it seems to be getting more complicated.
But my favorite quote, if I may be so indulged, the old world is dying, the new world struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters.
The one and only Mark Sloboda, International Relations Security Analyst. You can follow Mark on Twitter at Mark Sloboda1. You can find him on YouTube at youtube.com. At Real Politic with Mark Sloboda on YouTube, and on Facebook.com/Gramsci. Mark, man, always appreciate you, man. Thank you for your contribution. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having. Catch you again soon, Jamal.
Have a good one. All right, the man himself, Mark Sloboda. Yeah, I feel like the world is getting more complicated. And yeah, I appreciate Mark, his guidance, his explanation of how this world is put together. We have a few people on that give their takes, but Mark has been one of those people that I think have been more right than pretty much anybody else that I've spoken to on these issues of foreign policy. He tends to be a straight shooter with it, regardless of how grim it is, with a sense of humor along with that grimness. So he is deeply appreciated. And I say this, starting off the year, whether it was for the radio network and even continuing now, deeply, deeply appreciated. My next guest will be up shortly, but look, I want to thank all of you also. This is the first show starting off the year. It's a bit grim. Start off with this kind of massive attack in New Orleans. And just to catch the audience up, just in case you were under a rock over the last few days, a man, Shamsuddin Jabbar, a Texas native, born and raised in Texas, drove his truck into a crowd in Bourbon Street, killing 15, wounding scores more. On top of the 15, after he gets out of the truck in military outfit because he was a veteran, in body armor, and opens fire. He gets into a firefight with cops. Cops ultimately shoot him dead. Now, the police believes that he is not acting in this alone. At this point, the investigation is fluid, so we don't necessarily know, but the belief is that he was not acting alone, so there is a huge investigation that is taking place. On top of this happening, Elon Musk's Cybertruck blew up in front of Trump's hotel. Now, you've heard me say before that, it's a Garrick line from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I believe in consequences or coincidences. Coincidences do happen, but I do not trust coincidences. Now, this could just be a battery issue. It could be that the battery itself imploded. They tend to do that on these Cybertrucks, with Elon Musk not necessarily wanting to own up to the fact that there may be a defect in his car. On the positive side, nobody was killed in that. Apparently, the way that the Cybertruck is built, it goes up as opposed to out. And I would imagine you put that sort of engineering into a car, you understand that there's a potential for the car to blow up. So, for all of the talk of this also being a terrorist attack, we have no idea if these two things are related to one another, even though these things are being tied to one another, because it is super bizarre that it just so happens to blow up in front of Trump's hotel. There will be an investigation. The investigation will be ongoing. Joe Biden upped the ante for this when Joe Biden came out and said that this was basically inspired by ISIS. And this was apparently something that was in a video that he uploaded on social media before this happened, where it insinuated that there was some kind of ISIS connection. Not to mention, apparently, there was a flag in the truck. Again, all of this stuff is under investigation, so the investigation will be ongoing, but this is somewhat the latest that we have on it. What is being buried in this is that he had a divorce. It looks like his businesses went belly up or didn't go well, some kind of real estate business. He said he was going to kill his family and then decided he's going to kill as many people as he possibly can, effectively sparing his family, but taking everybody else along with him on his way out of this physical plane of existence. So the mental health issue is being downplayed. The being upplayed is the ISIS-inspired attack. Again, if we're going to play this game or play this role of this being ISIS-inspired and we're going to ignore the mental health aspect of it, we have just put into power in Syria a guy that was working in the leadership of ISIS, that was chopping off heads, and it was killing Americans. When he was in Iraq, he moved into Syria and continued Al-Qaeda brand in Syria, leading Al-Qaeda in Syria, again, chopping off heads. We're being told that he went through a phase in his life of chopping off heads. But now he's evolved. And in evolving, he realizes that chopping off heads is frowned upon by the rest of the world because they don't want their heads chopped off. Right now, they're effectively implementing Sharia law, their brand of it, in Syria, and allowing Israel to, A, destroy all of the defensive assets of Syria, while simultaneously steal and occupy more land in Syria. So this is a bit rich. In association with this, you have communications that apparently Israel outed between Turkey and Israel. Now, Erdogan is outraged over this. Oh, I was never talking to the Zionist state. Okay, I don't believe that at all. It seems that this military assault had to have some level of coordination between Istanbul and between Tel Aviv. Now, they don't want to own that. Even if it was back channel communication between the United States being the intermediary, I suspect that Israel is telling the truth on this very specific issue. Erdogan has not even owned up to the fact that he was backing the jihadists as they invaded Syria. So why on earth will he own up to what is deeply, deeply humiliating for him after all? While he is saying in one sense, Netanyahu is Hitler, behind the scenes, he seems to be working with him as they carve up and balkanize Syria. So there's that. I guess my point is, these things, it's just fascinating the way these things interact with each other. On top of that, we also have a shooting in New York where a bunch of people get shot. I haven't seen anyone dead yet. I guess that's a benefit. But apparently there is a New Year's shooting also at some kind of, I want to say nightclub. Yeah, nightclub. This was the scene. Oh, better yet, I can go to Ted Raw because my guest is here. Ted Raw, political cartoonist, syndicated columnist, host of TMI. Too Much Information, the morning show with Manila Chan at 10 to 12, Monday through Friday. Welcome to the show, Ted, and Happy New Year, man. How you doing today?
Happy New Year to you, too. Don't cut off any heads.
Yeah, man, it's a grim day to start, to put it mildly. I need to get your take on, well, I guess there are two things, right? I guess three things. I guess the first one is the attack in New Orleans on Bourbon Street. Mm-hmm. And as I was going, I was just giving a brief rundown to the audience. I did it the first thing this morning. I'm doing it again now. And by the way, before I even get into this, oh, this is shameless. If you guys dig the content and you find yourself coming back here often, definitely support this content. You can do so through PayPal, Patreon, or for that matter, Super Chat. All chats and stickers will be read, provided they're not racist, sexist, or bigoted. Also, like the content, share it, and hit the subscription button. Apparently, somebody told me, I did not even know that you accepted donations for the show. Because oftentimes when I'm doing, I'm slicing up the videos, and the slicing up the videos don't have that part in it. So there's that. I hate doing that. It's so humiliating to always add that part in, but it's just kind of part of the job. Welcome to the show, man, and Happy New Year. I'm glad to have you. I wanted to have you either to close the new year out or to bring the new year in. You've been a good friend of this show going all the way back to radio days. And so thank you for it. Give me your take on the Bourbon Street thing. So they're calling it ISIS inspired, but as I pointed out to the audience, there's a mental health component to this that can't be ignored. Apparently, the guy got divorced. On top of being divorced, he apparently had a mental breakdown. He was going to kill his family, his entire family, but decided to spare his family and just kill as many other Americans as he could possibly kill. He gets a truck, rents a truck, drives that truck to Bourbon Street. There were supposed to be these barricades, but those barricades, for whatever reason, were not up, in which case he could drive the car and plow it into the people and the civilians. Gets out the car, goes on a shooting spree, gets into a firefight with cops. The cops ends up killing him, shooting him dead. Apparently, he rented the truck from the same place, I believe, of the Elon Musk thing, but I could be wrong on that front.
The same app.
Yes, right. And so the Elon Musk thing was apparently they tracked down that guy. That guy also was part of the military and apparently went to the same military, I think Fort Bragg, that this guy did, that Jabbar did. And so people are making links and seeing whether or not these things are connected to one another. Elon Musk, of course, wants them to be because he doesn't want it to come out that he had a faulty truck that blew up. But as I pointed out to the audience, the truck is built for the explosion to go up, which means that there was some understanding that it could blow up. So there's that, right?
Right.
But give me a take on all of this. I mean, this is fascinating. I mean, it's a crappy way to start the new year off, especially for the people who are just going out to celebrate. But give me a take. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's a little spooky. I hadn't been to New Orleans for 10 years, but I went 3 weeks ago with my son. I was there.
Did you?
It was a month ago for Thanksgiving week. I was there for Thanksgiving week, and I hadn't been there in a long time. So,
I've been in Bourbon Street in years.
obviously, I stayed in the Treme area, and we walked around Bourbon Street, right, including right where that happened. And I did notice the construction on those things, those bollards that they were going to install. I did notice that they weren't done when I saw them. I guess they're still not done. Construction takes time. I mean, in cities, particularly old cities where, if you hit something that's like everything's historically landmarked, right? So they have to stop and do things. And New Orleans isn't exactly the richest city. So I'm sure things don't go, or the least corrupt. So I'm sure things don't go that fast. I mean, it was so, it's always spooky when something happens in a place where you just visited. I'm not to say, but it did. My first take when I heard that this was a guy with an Arab sounding name, ex-military, I was like, I bet this is an ISIS self-radicalized situation. My mind bounced back to a couple of similar attacks. There was the Fort Hood attack in, I guess, 2009. That was not ISIS technically, but it was a Yemen-based kind of analogous jihadi group that kind of recruited this guy online. He was I guess also kind of like a sergeant too, and he had gotten pissed off at U.S. What he had learned about U.S. foreign policy. I think a lot of people in the military have a front row seat to U.S. policy in the Middle East, and even if they themselves didn't serve there, they certainly are friends and colleagues with people who do. So it reminded me of that. It reminded me of also Texas connection. There was a right-wing cartoonist contest gathering in Garland, Texas, about 15 years ago. And two self-radicalized American ISIS members showed up with AR-15s and the full kind of like jihadi get up with the masks and ninja outfits, ready to kill lots of people. Fortunately, this was a right-wing cartoonist gathering, so they had hired armed security. And so I was always thinking, if this was a liberal one everyone would have died. And so they had armed security, and they were shot immediately as soon as they got out of their truck. And
Oh,
so,
that shouldn't be funny, but it is.
and then there's
Yeah.
also, yeah, well, you got to laugh when you can. And then
Yeah.
there was an ISIS, I believe it was ISIS, but definitely radical jihadi kind of self-radicalized, motivated attack on bicyclists on the west side of Manhattan a few years ago, where where a guy like basically stopped his truck and deliberately ran down bicyclists on the lower part of the west side highway, sort of not too far from the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. That's kind of like been forgotten. I think only one or two people were killed at that time, and then the assailant was also killed by NYPD. So, I mean, what struck me about all these things, first of all, was I was impressed by New Orleans and their law enforcement reaction, that they basically engaged with this assailant immediately. That, thinking about, compare that to like recent events in New York City, where we had, people sort of on the lam all day long. And I'm not even talking about Luigi, just on the lam, running around Midtown Manhattan for hours until they're finally turned in. No cops to be seen anywhere. And so, it's self-radicalization is very potent. It's, when there's a narrative that is appealing because it's accurate, namely that the United States is engaged in, sort of a war of civilizations against Islam and in all over the world, that, you can see why people would be that will be appealing to people who are Muslim themselves. And they're going to be like, these are my brothers and sisters who are being attacked, in Gaza and all over the place, and Yemen. And I want to do something. They feel like they're resistance fighters. I'm sure that's exactly how they feel. And then, of course, there's the mental health component that you brought up, which is, always interesting, right? I mean, my grandfather was mentally ill. He was in the French Resistance. Was he a hero? Was he a nut? Well, he was both. And it's kind of like, Mohammed Atta, by all accounts, the head hijacker on 9/11, by all accounts, he was not mentally ill. I mean, he was totally, sane. He would have, if he'd been captured alive, he would have been totally put on trial, and insanity defense never would have worked. But then there are other cases where people are, mentally weak, let's just say, and they're more prone to being recruited for things like this. So it's really complicated, which is why my answer is so long. And I think, and the real problem here is, of course, he's gone, so we don't get to ask any questions.
And see, that's the other part. I always hate it when the people, like, because, well, there are a few reasons, right? Our government lies to us a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And, because the government lies to us a lot, it makes it difficult to know where the floor is, like what's real in this situation. I'm not saying that this is not real. So I just want to be very clear that I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying our government lies a lot. And the reality of these things, it's always a little bit better to solidify the reality of it when that person is alive. Like when they whack the guy that kills Kennedy, what is his name? Lee Harvey Oswald, for example. Okay, well, you can't question Harvey Oswald. Like, that case looks very dodgy right off the bat. It looks like there was another shooter. It looks like the government was trying to cover it up. And then you get like 60 years where the government has all of these secret files that don't say anything about it.
And then the guy who whacks Oswald himself dies, right?
That's what I mean, right?
Jack
and so it's kind of like, okay, how do we know that this is real in the context of who killed Kennedy and how it happened and everything else? And we just supposed to have to take the official word for it. Okay, well, I don't. And so you're going to have a lot of people who are going to be very skeptical that this is exactly what they say it is. And you're getting it now, right? You're getting people saying, well, this guy was an immigrant. Okay, he wasn't an immigrant. He was born in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Like, cut it out. And then you're going to try to get, well, this was about ISIS, and ISIS has just attacked the U.S. Okay, well, it sounds like this guy had a mental breakdown. Right here, for example, it says the FBI is studying the videos Biden referenced in his remarks, which the suspect appears to record while driving from Texas to Louisiana. Law enforcement confirmed on ABC News. This is the videos are dark, so the suspect is hard to see. But the suspect could be heard talking about his divorce and his desire to kill members of his family before ultimately deciding to carry out the attack on Bourbon Street, according to enforcement official. The suspect is also heard talking about ISIS. They mentioned the spokesman for the consulting firm Deloitte confirmed to ABC News that Jabbar worked for the company at staff level since 2021. And so I guess that's kind of my point, right? It's like he's talking about both things. They're going to focus on terrorism because that's sexier. We're fighting terrorists. That fits within a context, a narrative. The man having a mental breakdown because of a divorce, less so. Less so. But both are relevant, right? One inspires the other in many respects. This is going to get spun in so many different ways, depending upon the context of the people who want to spin it. But right now, I would say the biggest myth that has been floating on social media is, hey, that guy looks foreign. That guy's an immigrant. He came through the Mexican border that Joe Biden left wide open. It's like, okay, just shut up.
That's just not true. Also, you can't really, there's no anti-terrorist action that you can take against this brand, right? I mean, you don't, with ISIS, it's not like ISIS members are sent from the Middle East to the United States across a border or by into an airport. I mean, ISIS is a brand that anyone, right, like can just say, I'm going to self-deputize myself as a member of ISIS. You don't even have to talk to ISIS. You don't have to email them or anything. You just like you print out the flag. You declare yourself a member of ISIS, and then retroactively, after you carry out your attack, then you say, they take responsibility and say, or they take credit, right? And they say, yeah, that was our guy. I mean, you with that model, traditional anti-terrorism activities are just not going to work, even if they would have been effective normally. I mean, it literally is like you're trying to kill an idea. Yeah. And because it is just an idea, and ideas are viral. And, so what is the idea? The idea is that the U.S. is engaged in violence against Muslims and Muslim regimes in the Middle East and in Central and South Asia, and that the U.S. public, like people, just normal schlumps walking around New Orleans celebrating New Year's Eve, are all complicit because they're U.S. citizens and they pay taxes into the defense budget that carries out these foreign policies. Well, I mean, okay, the thing is, the first part is definitely true that the U.S. government does do all these things.
Second part
the
is
second
true.
part is like debatable, highly debatable.
That's also true.
But
I mean, let's be honest. That's our argument about the Middle East, right? Like when we are going after Saddam Hussein, or when we're going after these leaders, we've said this guy is a bad guy, and so we are okay blowing it to hell. Whether it's with Assad and all of the Christians, Alawites, and all of these other groups that are being tortured and killed right now, we didn't care about the fact that those people were still under that particular government. We wanted to get rid of Assad. When we go after Libya, we have no clear, we don't care at all about the local populations that are there. Yep. I mean, even sanctions. If you think about the sanctions that we were applying to Syria, for example, it was crippling that country and the people who are living under those sanctions. Venezuela, another situation where it's like you have these crippling sanctions that are not punishing the leaders. Assad had like cars and everything else. He was still living in wealth. It was the populations that those things were going after. So I agree with you. I guess my feeling is, and again, I think this had more to do with mental illness than the other part. But I agree with the premise.
Case.
In this case.
But
in other cases,
that will not always be the case.
Agreed.
And sort of like, I mean, even if it is, let's just say, stipulate for the sake of argument, that everybody who does this is mentally ill. Okay, well, we've got a lot of, a huge population of mentally ill people. Yeah. So if you really want to attack that idea that like, I mean, the only way you could attack that idea is to remove that idea as being true. Even if you told mentally ill people we are being attacked by the people of Venus, most mentally ill people would be sane enough to think that's probably not true, and that would not catch on. So it's like you have to suck the air out of that narrative by not doing these things anymore. Not to mention, I don't think you would have as many terrorist groups like ISIS targeting the United States or posting online material targeting the United States if we were not engaged in that particular way in the Middle East. We just wouldn't. And this is not to say that we deserve this, or certainly not that the people in New Orleans deserve this. They had nothing to do with it. They're just out for the night. But
just be clear, I'm not making that argument at all. It's just
that the U.S. government is what they're saying is pointless. It's dumb. It's like you guys don't get it. You don't know what you're doing.
I mean, in one sense, we are decrying a group that we are supporting in another sense. It's just outrageous. Like, Jelani was out there chopping heads and killing Americans. Like, let's be very clear. And, being the affiliate for Al-Qaeda, the leader of Al-Qaeda in Syria. And this was before he was being part of ISIS. Like, the same group that we are saying, this group is horrible, this group is horrible. In another sense, we are supporting their activities in another country because we don't like the government of that other country. We do it all over the world, like these terrorists, whether it's in Ukraine and the Nazis, whether it's the kill squads in South America where we were going after the Sandinista government. So we are, okay with putting money into overthrowing those governments, putting in dictators. Like, we have zero issue with using terrorists, Nazis, or any of these right-wing groups, these lunatics for hire, in order to knock over governments that we don't necessarily like. And then we're shocked when that stuff comes home to roost. It's outrageous. Like, the idea, the dichotomy of us, let's say last month, backing terrorists to knock over Syria, while simultaneously today shaking our fists at terrorists who apparently attacked this group. It's just astonishing. That's all. It's the political entanglements that we allow. And the media is not going to report it that way. The media is going to say ISIS-inspired attack. And because we're love and light, we don't like to support governments. We don't like dictators. None of that stuff is true, right? Like,
none of that stuff is true.
It's just frustrating.
We like our terrorists. We like our dictators. We don't like the other side.
We like our monsters.
And the other side's dictators.
It is just
sometimes they're the same dictator. So Saddam Hussein used to be our dictator.
Yes, he was. So was Gaddafi at one point.
Absolutely.
France had no issue with Gaddafi at one point. It's just frustrating. Like, these people, that could have been any of us, right? I mean, I used to take trips on New Year's. That was when I had a job. And you would have, like, that could have easily been me just moseying around, looking in windows, and bam, you're no longer associated with this life. And you did nothing but go puttering about, like Bourbon Street, of all places, one of the most populated places that you can find on New Year's. Like, it's just astonishing. Those people are just gone, just like that. I know some people are going to look at this and say, oh, poor American. Fair enough. But, I find these people to be as innocent as people abroad in the same way. I don't like it in either case. New York shooting. What is going on with that? So this was another travesty that took place, this one last night. There are cops all over the place. Apparently there was some kind of nightclub. I assume that people were getting their groove on, as they typically do, and decided to come out shooting over something stupid. That's my assumption. New York. Apparently they found cops to pollute this place, or so like be all over the place.
Yeah, so that's where they are. Because I've been looking for them here in New York.
Yeah, a lot of people have been looking for them. A lot of people have been looking for the cops.
Oh, there you are.
So what is going on with the subways in New York? Like, so Hochul comes out and says subways are safe. Then you get a woman set on fire. You get a stabbing.
Before the woman got set on fire before Hochul said that.
Oh, really? I thought it was after. And then apparently there was another situation where somebody gets thrown off the platform into a moving train.
Yeah.
What the hell is going on with New York, Ted?
He's still alive. I hope he pulls through. He's in critical condition. As you can imagine, he fell into the trough between the tracks. the train passed over him. Everyone assumed he was gone, but he obviously the injuries were severe. But he may make it. I hope so. That happened on my subway line, so I'm like, oh my god.
Did you? Did it?
So like, yeah, it's on the number 1 line. In a safe neighborhood. 18th Street is Chelsea. It's a very safe neighborhood. So, it's a cute station. It's a little bit, it's a small little station. It's very weird that it happened there. I mean, anyway, the thing is, today in the New York Times, they're saying, despite the city's efforts to make the subways safer, it's just not working. And it's like, okay, well, first of all, they're finally admitting the statistics are there has been an uptick in violent crime in the subway system. Great. Okay. But there's no effort at all to make the subways safer at all. There used to be, and you've heard me rant about this before, up until the 80s, there was an entire New York City transit police force with their own uniforms, their own logo, their own training mechanism. And these cops, if you ever see the Taking of Pelham 123, the original version, you see them with their leather jackets. They're really cool looking cops. These were cops they lived and breathed the subways. Every night train had two subway cops. They'd walk through, open the doors, twirl their nightstick. They always knew what was going on. If you needed to summon one, you could yank the emergency brake. They'd all come running. If a suspect ran into a tunnel, they would be able to kill the power and chase them, and they knew the tunnels. This was an expertise. Giuliani got rid of the transit police, and that's okay back in the 90s because the city was so much safer because of the expanding economy, the end of the crack epidemic. So it was like, oh, no big deal. We don't really need them anymore. But now we do. And there's no cops in the subway at all. Sometimes you'll see a little gaggle of them, all in a cluster, like 9 of them, all by the turnstiles up on the upper level. Never on the trains, never on the platforms. And they're all on their phones. They're like teenagers. And I don't know what they're doing, Candy Crush or whatever, but they're not doing their jobs. And if you talk to any New Yorker, they will tell you the same thing. And it's so laughable. When the train pulls into certain stations, there will be an announcement that will say, police are on the upper level of this station. If you have any questions or concerns, you can reach them there. It's like, excuse me, psychotic, person who is holding me up at knife point. I must stop and go upstairs and consult with the NYPD at this time. You hold that thought. You keep that right here. I'll be right back. I mean, these things are moving in seconds. You're trapped inside a metal box under the surface of the earth, with no phone that works, no way to reach out. You're on your own in there.
So what is the issue? They just don't want to pay for it?
I don't understand the issue. It must have something to do with that. I mean, obviously the city is broke post-COVID, and the budget deficit is crazy. The migrant crisis, the shrinking tax base from the shrinking of because of work at home, and all the office buildings are shrinking. But it is a catastrophe in terms of the safety of the system is non-existent. You're on your own. If something comes up, I mean, a couple weeks ago, guys just randomly fixated on me and started yelling at me. And I won't lie. I mean, I was scared. I'm 6'2". I can handle myself, but I had recently broken my wrist. I was in a brace at the time. I'm thinking, if I have to mix it up with this dude who's half my age, he's going to kick my ass. I mean,
never admit to your Ted. Never admit that. Never admit that.
So fortunately,
somebody's going to notice and like, I think that's Ted Raw.
We both stayed seated.
It
was all right, no big deal. But my point is, it's scary in there, and I don't know why they're not doing anything. All I know is that the cops, whether you're talking about above ground or underground, they're standing down. That's
amazing.
They have been standing down ever since BLM. And I don't know if it's their vengeance, if they want us to stop killing Black people, we're not going to do our jobs. I don't know what it is. I don't know if that's it, but it seems like that might be it.
Because it seems
they're slow walking their jobs.
Well, for the governor to acknowledge we have a problem in our transit systems, meaning it's acknowledged.
Well, it's full of homeless
And,
people. I mean, it's insane. It used to be like during the day you would really never see them. They'd come in at night. You might see one on a train. You'd see in a car. Then it would be smelly, so everyone goes to the next car. Now there's 3 or 4 per car, every car in the day. So like,
wow.
there's no. Often you can't sit down because there's so many homeless people sleeping sprawled across the benches, and a lot of them are psychotic. I mean, if you weren't psychotic when you became homeless, you become psychotic from being homeless.
Mhm.
So I have a lot of sympathy and for them. I'm like, obviously I have compassion. I want them to be taken care of. I don't want them to be sleeping outside or on the subway. But I mean, this is a broken system. They shouldn't be in the subway.
That's astonishing. I mean, like it's, and I'll show you something else. One of the things, and the reason I'm bringing this up, so the Guardian Angels, this group has apparently resumed walking through the subway systems. And listen to what he's saying for the moment. And I remember listening to this, feeling off about this, and I think I know why I feel off about this. But I'm going to play the clip from him.
Well, in day and night patrols, 3-person patrols, we're all together. We're walking through the cars, which is something the police no longer do. Notice there are no mental health workers, there are no crisis intervention. They have all these fancy names. I've never seen them. And we spend millions of dollars, I might add. Our job is, A, do a wellness check on a homeless person. If they're homeless or emotionally disturbed, see if they're okay. If all of a sudden we walk into a situation where there's an episode, which oftentimes happens, we have to calm it down. A lot of times, these homeless and emotionally disturbed persons, they know of the Guardian Angels. We can have a calming effect. We can also bring the situation.
Two thoughts immediately with this. One, if what happened in New Orleans happened in New York, you're right. It would have been a while before the cops ever got there. The guy might have, killed even more people because of the slow response that New York has. 2, they shouldn't have to do that. That was I was like, we pay for cops for a reason. They shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't have to have a situation where a group of vigilantes, for all intents and purposes, I know they're not killing people or anything else, but they're effectively coming together and taking over the job of the police department, because the police department, who gets billions of dollars, by the way, New York is massive. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, spend more than $10 billion on the cops. Correct me if I'm wrong. That number sounds high, but it's a huge amount of money. You shouldn't need civilians to come together and do the job of policing. The police have just completely abdicated in New York. I don't know if it's an issue with the governor. I don't know if it's an issue with the incompetent mayor. I don't know where that issue is. But they have gotten to the point of saying enough is enough. We'll take on the responsibility ourselves as citizens of New York. That's my issue with this. It's not so much, it's like I respect what they're doing. I just feel like they shouldn't have to do it. Give me your thought.
Jamal, you're right. I mean, I'm thinking about, while I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking about how, first of all, New York City has some of the highest taxes, income and sales and use taxes in the United States, right? So this is a capitalist society, unfortunately, from my point of view. And but the point is, you should get what you pay for. And we do pay a lot in this city for everything, not just, but taxes in particular. And so, we are footing the bill. It's not like this is a little town in rural Idaho, where it's like suddenly we're overrun by crime and they don't know what to do because there's only 2 cops. This is like, we have the infrastructure to deal with this. And when I think, well, why is this happening? I think in the end, we're going to find out that there's some kind of massive systemic financial corruption within the city and the NYPD. It reminds me of, you've heard of the Gilgo Beach serial killing, right, in Long Island, where there's at least there's one suspect currently, looks like it's probably him, in custody. And there may have been multiple serial killers operating and killing, particularly prostitutes in Long Island. And the thing is, that went basically unsolved for about 25 years. Bodies kept washing up on the same beach over and over and over. And it came to pass, ultimately, why the Suffolk County Police never caught anyone, because what was going on was that the chief of police in Suffolk County was corrupt. He was grifting. He was on the take, and he was ultimately arrested and jailed for basically running, a very corrupt county police department that was in charge of this. And it turns out that all throughout this period, when the bodies were washing up, the FBI was reaching out and saying, "Hey, we know you have a problem here. We'd like to help out and send our top guys from Quantico to examine all the physical evidence in these cases, and let's nail this SOB," right? It's like, but the cop's like, no, I've got all this. Why? Because he didn't want the FBI in his business and then maybe accidentally figuring out what he was up to, right? So then, once he was gone, there was a woman who was hired from within the ranks. She was elevated to the police chief. She had been like stewing like all the other like underlings who were like, we want to get on top of this. She like formed a task force. Boom! Within like 6 months, this guy was under arrest, right? And of course, she did reach out to the FBI and availed herself of everything. So and I keep thinking there must be something like this, like when things don't make sense, where it's just sort of like, yeah, this is New York City. You got, we have the cops, and this is a city where you used to see cops everywhere. When I got here, 40 years ago, you'd see them doing street patrol. You'd see them at the diner. You see them at the pizza place. They're always on the sidewalk. There's always, if you need a cop, seriously, you could just go hang out on the street. Within 3-4 minutes, a cruiser is going to go by. You can flag them down. It's like they're all over the place. That's not true anymore. Like when they say there's no cops when you need them, that's 100% true. That didn't used to be true.
Wow. I'm just shocked by how New York is degraded. Do you think, would you put this on COVID or would you put this on BLM? Meaning, do you think it's a situation
they were one and the same, kind of, right? Because they happened at the same time. And I always said that BLM would never have been as big a deal without COVID. I remember one time it was like came to me. I was parking my car and a BLM protest was going right by. And this one guy goes to me just randomly. He goes, you know why I'm here? I go, no. He goes, no Yankees games. Everything's closed. There's nothing else to do. And I think when, people were, unemployed, underemployed, working from home, all the movie theaters are closed, no ball games. It's kind of like it creates the space for a bigger protest movement, right?
Yeah,
it's kind of like, this is what's going on. It doesn't mean that people don't care about the cause at other times, but you have the time. People need time. And that's why there's more protests on weekends than there are during the weekdays, right? And so they're one and the same. And I do think that a lot of cops, white cops in particular, but not exclusively, were bitter, and they felt we're underappreciated. We're being picked on by the liberal elites and all that, and so we're going to withhold our labor. If you don't like what we do, fuck off. And I think that was part of it. And I think also the city ran out of money, and they're not talking about it, because if that word goes out, it'll become like a doom loop that goes even faster. Oh, New York City's bankrupt. Oh, better not invest in New York City. And then everyone pulls out and it gets even worse. So they're trying to talk it up. They're trying to fake it till they make it, I think. But, it's not working, because anybody can plainly see that the city's in crisis.
Yeah, there's something obviously wrong. It just is, right? One of the other interesting things that's been floating about is the H1B1 fight. I have been fascinated by this fight.
Me too.
That's been taking place. Personally, I think MAGA is right on this. You have corporations that are obviously abusing the H1B1 visa program to maximize their own profit. That is my context in general. Corporations want to maximize their profit. They're legally bound to do so. And if you can do so by gutting labor, and then you get, this belief that the billionaires, like Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, Donald Trump, are supposed to somehow care about labor, despite the fact that they've used this kind of "Make America Great" framing for this stuff. And so you get this kind of anti-corporate argument that is coming out of like Steve Bannon, Laura Loomer, hell, even Charlie Kirk saying, oh my God, this is not what we voted for. This is horrible. And you get Trump siding with the globalists, as they call them. basically saying, I like H-1B1s. I think H-1B1s are great. I want to play this clip from Steve Bannon because this clip is, he is a maniac about China. He is like out of his mind about China. He is right about Elon Musk. At least I think so. I want to get your take on this because, and I want to play this other clip also to piggyback on this because it's not like they haven't mentioned this. Like, there are some people who say, well, this never came up in the debates. Fair enough. It never came up in the debates. But you have commentary from people like J.D. Vance, from Vivek Ramaswamy, from Donald Trump himself, talking about how these things get abused. Donald Trump on the debate stage, I've abused these things. We shouldn't have them to be functioning like this. And when I'm president, blah, 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 blah. So this is Bannon having no F's to give, going after Elon Musk. Again, I think he's a lunatic about China. I think he's right about Musk. This is Bannon.
Crony capitalism, Elon Musk. And by the way, when we cut him off, he went begging. He went begging the CCP, and that's why they have the joint venture in Shanghai, the Tesla, which is 100% of his value, right? This guy lives on government contracts and taxpayer subsidies. Okay, it's all. We're going to get Joe Allen in here for a second to transform it. Elon Musk, once again, brother, I'm smart enough to tell you no to your face, and I'm evil enough to be able to expose you as a running dog for the greatest enemy this nation's ever had. You are a war profiteer. You're sleeping with the enemy, brother, and you've been doing it because you're not an American nationalist. You're not even an American. All you are is a globalist, okay? A globalist. And you will go where anybody writes you a check, and you would take it from Adolf Hitler himself because you're taking it from people that are as bad as Adolf Hitler. The murderous regime of.
You would take a check from Adolf Hitler himself. Now, just to be very clear, that these people who are in power, meaning whether it's Trump, Vance, Ramaswamy, all of these people know that the H-1B1 visa program is damaged and problematic, and yet they are going, they're backing it. This is Vivek when he's talking about right here, H-1B1 being a broken system, and yet again they're fully in on this.
A lot of the people who have come here through the H-1B system would tell you, as I would, that it is just a broken system, no matter who you're seeking to serve. For example, you want to talk about special interests and lobbying? This is direct Silicon Valley lobbying that said that if you get your H-1B visa and you're hired by one company, you're effectively like a slave. You can't switch to a different company. That's not a free labor market. So there's so much that's broken and bureaucratized. Here's the next question about the H-1B visa system is why the heck do we do it on the basis of a lottery when you could actually just select the very best people? So there's a lot that's broken about the administrative state, the bureaucracy. My general approach is when something's broken in government, you can't really fix it when it's lasted that long. You need to shut it down, start with a blank slate.
Now, keep in mind, these are the same people, by the way, that want to get rid of the Department of Education. So in one sense, it's, yeah, we need to get, Americans are lazy. And by the way, whites, this is not just blacks, right? They're talking about all Americans. Americans are lazy. We can't find super qualified people who are excited to do these jobs. And so we got to bring in more labor from abroad and overseas. And simultaneously, we need to get rid of the Department of Education because we don't like bureaucracies, and this is a problem in our country.
And we don't want to forgive student loans or make college education.
Exactly.
We don't want to make Americans be able to get STEM degrees so that they can make H-1B visas not necessary.
Isn't that astonishing? How much magical thinking can you pack into 1 week of conversation?
Well, it's also, the thing is, so the H-1B visa system is not just broken, it's just not it is broken, as he said, as Vivek said, but it's also a lie. So, it's not being enforced, right? So the law says that you can't, that if you're a tech company, let's say, it's not just tech companies, but mostly they're in the news. So if you're like, let's say, Alphabet, and you want to bring in some Indian coders or whatever, you've got to prove that you put out a legitimate, real call for American coders for this job, and that you tried, you did everything you could, you brought in everyone you could, you were serious about hiring them, you just couldn't find any, and then when you were out of desperation, you turned to the H-1B visa program. You certify that. It's just not true. And, and you can show that by the fact that 4% of American tech workers are unemployed. Their unemployment rate for the tech sector, for STEM graduates, is higher than for the average, than the overall unemployment rate. Our people, we have hundreds of thousands of tech workers, many of them kind of like over 40, so therefore victims of ageism, not going to be hired in Silicon Valley, not being considered or taken seriously. And so as far as I'm concerned, if you have one American tech worker, one who could do the job, or maybe their training's rusty, but you could train them in a few months to do the job, then no H-1B visas for you. Sorry.
Agreed.
None. I mean, you look out for your own first. That's what the law says, for one thing. And so you could just say the law needs to be enforced. But I mean, I think since the law is obviously there's no enforcement mechanism whatsoever, I kind of agree with old Vivek 1.0, like, get rid of it. It's not a working system. I went to engineering school. I was only there for 3 years. I went to Columbia Engineering School. I was an applied physics and nuclear engineering major. So I graduated later. They threw me out after junior year. I came back as a history major. So I'm a history major. But I spent 3 years, as an engineer. And I know lots of people who did graduate from my school, my classmates, and I talked to lots of counselors, jobs counselors at Columbia and other places. My dad went to MIT, Caltech, and Stanford. He's an engineer. And the thing is, there's not really a lot of employment opportunities for Americans in the U.S. I mean, it's a tough field of business. I mean, first of all, it's hard to get into these schools. And when you do get out, you're highly specialized. Let's say you're like a applied physicist. Well, okay, that's great, but if they're hiring for mechanical engineers, you can't get that job. If they're hiring for chemical engineers, you can't get that job. You got to hope that like the right defense contracts are coming up at the right time, or if you're a civil engineer, that the country's in the mood to build new bridges. They're not always in the mood to build new bridges. So like, and then you'll get that shot to build some new bridges, and then like, you're like a professional athlete, then like, you work for 15 years, then you don't work ever again. So the point is, and engineering jobs don't really pay that well. But the other statistic is, as Vivek alluded to, it is indentured servitude. If you come from, say, India to the United States, and I mention India because it's the #1 source of H-1B visas, you work for that one company. If that one company, and I've known people in this position, when they don't need you anymore, or let's just say they don't like the cut of your jib, or they, you piss off your boss, you're gone. And not only are you gone, you have to immediately leave the country.
Leave the country.
Yep. People, like, I knew someone who they had to go to the airport, and literally they had to leave so fast they couldn't even sell their car. And the airport is full at New York of these H-1B former H-1B visa holders. They drive their car to the airport. They put a note on the windshield saying, I had to leave, please dispose of my car.
Wow.
It's like that. They can't like shop around and look for another possible employer. And they're paid 60% as much as an American is paid for the same job. So this is a compliant workforce. They terrorize all the Americans are constantly told, like, if you don't, toe the line, if you're sassy, if you ask for a raise, we'll replace you and bring in someone from Bangladesh. So shut up. And so, I mean, it's toxic. It is, I mean, if you could, and also this whole idea, like, even it's like Trump, and there's like this implication, like, well, America really needs to recruit people for these high-end jobs. I would argue that if we're going to bring in foreigners to work, I don't want them taking the best jobs.
Exactly.
Let's have the shitty jobs, right?
Yeah.
Like really, truly, the best jobs I want to have going to my fellow citizens, paying, and I want them to earn that money and pay those taxes and buy their cars. I want, it's a ridiculous thing.
Yeah, I agree with you. And even for the crappy jobs, right? So this is JD Vance. JD Vance was on Joe Rogan. I'm hoping they don't ding me for this. So I'm going to play this like in the window. Let's see if that, in fact, I'm not even going to play it in the window. I'm just going to play the audio because Joe Rogan is just a maniac on hitting this stuff. But this is JD Vance, and he's talking about a CEO that they were kind of, just talking in general. And the CEO said the quiet part out loud is like effectively mad that he couldn't get illegal immigrants into the country so he could use them for their workforce.
About this, if you've got millions of illegal aliens, okay, let me tell you a story. In 2017, 2018, when I was in the private sector, I was at a business conference dinner, and I was seated next to the CEO of one of the largest hotel chains in America. This is, I think, probably 2018. And the guy is going on and on about how much he hates Donald Trump. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, why do you hate Donald Trump so much? Because again, I was sort of a Trump skeptic in 2015, and at this point, I was kind of starting to really get on the Trump train. And he said, well, the reason I hate Donald Trump, he says, is because Donald Trump's border policies have cut down the number of illegal immigrants. And because I can't pay illegal immigrants under the table anymore, I have to pay American workers, and they want much higher wages. And I was like, this guy.
It's that. It's like whether you're talking about people coming from, let's say, to work at Amazon or at Tesla from these H-1 programs. It's that. It's the same dynamic. If you had a corporation that could dump trash into the air, they would do it. That's why we have laws preventing them from doing so. If they could dump trash into the water, they would do so. That's why we have laws against them doing so. If they can offshore costs, they want to offshore costs, whether that's sending a job overseas, whether that's hiring a 5-year-old to clean a toilet and paying them $1, they will do those things, which is the reason why we have laws to prevent them from doing those things. And as you point out, the H-1B1 visa program is being abused in and of itself because they don't even follow the laws associated with that program because they, again, want to maximize their profit. And it's not just, okay, I'm going to pay this guy 60% less. It's, I can lower wages by doing so, meaning I can force down wages across the board in the same way that unions increase the cost by virtue of having a group of people make more money. I mean, you're pulling the trend up, or you're pulling the amount of money that is going towards a particular career, a particular position, by virtue of being unionized, even in places that are not unionized because they have to compete. The same thing is true in the reverse, where you're driving down wages in the other way by bringing in people where you could pay 60% less and using that labor as opposed to other labor where you would have to pay American a typical wage. Like, these people are getting over. It's just like, and now MAGA is coming to the conclusion this is not what we voted for. And from my point of view, this is exactly what you voted for.
It is what they voted for. I mean, look, Donald Trump had that history, right? I mean, interestingly, he misspoke when he said that he used H-1B visas a lot. He used H-2B visas, which is unskilled workers. Same principle, though. When he built Trump Tower in the 80s, there were a lot of Polish and Russian illegal immigrants to New York, and he hired Polish workers to build Trump Tower. Notoriously, didn't even pay them. They slept on site because they were so broke they hadn't gotten paid. They slept on the construction site. And so, famously, Donald Trump has a long history of this. Yeah, I mean, capitalists are going to capitalist. I mean, that's I don't even hold it against them, really. I mean, it's like, if I were playing that role, I would do the same thing. You have to, in order to compete. It's a race to the bottom. That's why I don't like capitalism. But it's up to us to control these things. And it is interesting. I mean, there is an alliance here potentially between economic nationalists on the right and economic nationalists on the left. I mean, the old school big, labor unions, that they were against all this.
Yes.
Yes. The left with a class analysis, they were always against all this. We were always against all this. We understood that rapacious, globalist billionaires. I mean, Elon Musk isn't. It's true, he's not an American. Vivek Ramaswamy is not really an American. I mean, it's like these are people who they have a globalist point of view, and they chase the capital wherever it goes. I don't even blame them. But it's like they're looking out for their class interests, and we should do the same.
Exactly.
That's all.
Head roll, man. You were making my argument, man. When this first came out, I was like, MAGA's right. MAGA's right. On this one, they got it right.
I just hope that for Donald Trump's he's in a tough situation, right? He wants to keep his alliance together. And Molly Ivins, the famous liberal columnist for the Texas Observer, used to say, "You dance with them that brung you in politics." And I think that's kind of who's the ones that Donald Trump's going to figure out who he's got to dance with. I'm going to say them that brung him is not Team Doge. It's MAGA. They brung him. He's the reason they're the reason that he was elected again,
I think,
and that he's not in prison now, right?
MAGA's going to get betrayed big time on this.
Well, if they do, it's going to be
I could be wrong,
ugly.
but what does he have to lose? I mean, like, he's only going to be in it for 4 years. What does he have to lose?
He wants to be loved, right? And I think part of him wants to, and I would have this discussion with him. I'd say, look, Donald, you're old now. This is the last chapter of your career. You may not die next week, but we're all getting older. You're getting older, and so do you want there to be a lot of elementary schools named after you? Do you maybe want to be, on the $50 bill one day? Do you want to be remembered as a great president? You won't be remembered as a great president from your first term. So this is your chance to do a bunch of things like Nixon went to China, stuff that goes against brands that only a conservative can do. Like only a conservative can, for example, make peace with China or with Russia. Only a conservative can, bust a move on like healthcare. It's got to be a Republican who does that. So it's like, do you want to go out against brand and do that? Then you could be beloved. You could leave this and end up, as the 5th president on Mount Rushmore, or you can suck up to the Doge team, and who doesn't care about you really, and they're just using you for those government contracts, and we'll see. You're not going to be beloved then. It's kind of like he doesn't have anything to lose. He really could just. He has the opportunity to do the right thing. If he wants.
I just get the sense that, like you said, capitalist is going to be a capitalist. You put a businessman in the White House, he's still a businessman. That's still his framing of the world, still the way he thinks. But Ted Rawl, political cartoonist, syndicated columnist, co-host of TMI, Too Much Information, on YouTube with the one and only the great Manila Chan from 10 a.m. 12. Ted, when do you want me on the show?
10 a.m.
10 a.m. Okay. Wait, you want me on today at 10?
Oh, I want you on.
When do you want me on? That's the other question.
I know we have some for today. Okay.
You have a good one, man. And Happy New Year, Ted.
Pardon?
Happy New Year, by the way.
You too. Happy New Year.
Have a good one. All right. We are okay. My guest left. He had just popped in. He hopefully will be back. There he is. There he is. We are joined with a new camera, looking great in the new year. The one and only Peter Coffin. Peter Coffin, he is a journalist with over 250,000 YouTube subscribers, podcaster, and author. In his book, Custom Reality and You, they explore a world where profit is the driving force. Happy New Year, man. How you doing today? You doing all right?
Happy New Year. I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I am doing good. I'm doing better than the people in New Orleans. Let me do just a heads up to the audience real quick, because I always hate this transition because it feels so vulgar. But look, if you guys dig the show, if you dig the content, you give it a like, share it. You can hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. I pop in at all times of the day and night because I don't sleep all that well. And so it could be 2 a.m. and you will see me when real men can't sleep. Real men do the news. Also, if you really dig the content, it's the truth. If you really dig the content, you can support it through PayPal, Patreon, or Super Chats. All chats and stickers will be read, providing they're not racist, sexist, or bigoted. If you want to take the piss out of me, you can even do that. Let's start with New Orleans. So as I brief the audience, this was a grim situation that took place yesterday. A man by the name of Shamsud Din Jabbar. He rents a truck, takes that truck, drives it to Louisiana, goes to Bourbon Street, goes around a police car, plows through a crowd, killing 15. injures scores more. He gets out, starts a gunfight with the cops. The cops end up shooting him dead. Now, apparently, there was an ISIS flag in the back. There were videos that apparently he put out on social media. Those videos have been removed. But Joe Biden came out and, I guess, briefed people on what was in those videos. But what it boils down to is apparently he was divorced. It sounds like he was having a complete mental breakdown. He said he was going to kill his entire family. Then somewhere along the way, he made the decision to just kill as many people as he possibly could kill. Now, the FBI is looking into this, believing that there's other people associated with it. And so they're not looking at this as a purely individual thing. Now, that doesn't really make sense, though. Because if he's having a mental breakdown in the car, he's like driving and talking in video, saying, I was going to kill my family, I had a divorce, but now I was going to kill as many other people. Then it becomes weird if they're saying that there may be someone else working with him in this. Like, that sounds like a spur of the moment thing. If you're saying, I'm going to kill my family, no, I have a better idea. I'm going to kill a lot of people. But then somehow you're working with somebody else. So that doesn't make sense to me, but whatever. They're still doing an investigation in order to figure out what's going on. Simultaneously to this, Cybertruck blows up outside of Trump Hotel.
Yeah, not a good day for trucks yesterday.
Not a good day at all. And apparently these were rented at the same place. And then they even is a connection with the military with the guy who owned the Cybertruck. Apparently going through the same military, I believe Fort Bragg's, as Jabbar, Samshud Din Jabbar. Now, just one last point before I bring you in, Peter. To knock down the nonsense that has been coming out of social media. Initially, they said he was an immigrant who immigrated apparently through the Mexican border, who was ISIS fighter. None of that was true. This guy was an American. He was from Texas. He was as American as I was, and as any of you who are watching. Let's start there. I guess give me your take, Peter. I mean, this is pretty grim, to put it mildly, but give me your thoughts.
Yeah, like I said, bad day for trucks, cyber and otherwise.
Yeah.
I don't know. It to me, the fact that there's been some implication that both of these were somehow related to immigrants in some way it's strange amidst this whole H-1B controversy that's been kicked up by Elon and Vivek. It's interesting that, you know, they kicked up this crap and suddenly now whether or not it's either of these things is related to immigrants. Obviously, the second one we already know wasn't. The first one,
that guy wasn't an immigrant. That guy was American.
No, it's a guy. And why would an American want to bomb Trump? There's only like a huge segment of people in this country that are convinced that it's Hitler. Can't figure that one out.
but
the other one,
I mean, yeah. But I'm sorry.
But the other one, having the alleged ISIS flag in it, and you know, we don't have any information on this guy. It's been the opposite of how they've treated the Cybertruck thing. They wanted people to know about the Cybertruck thing, and they wanted it to look bad for Tesla. They framed that up very much as if that was just a Cybertruck that spontaneously exploded.
Now, to be fair,
like,
some of them
oh
do.
Yes,
yeah, I mean, some of them
but it's
do.
like it's statistically
but it's very
not.
coincidental. Yeah, very coincidental.
Yeah. It's close enough. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, just so happened
they felt like they had
a
enough.
Trump hotel. Yeah, yeah. It's a little weird.
But the thing is I'm in no way shocked that like they've told the population that this guy's Hitler nonstop for a year, actually 6. But I'm not shocked by that one. I am a little shocked by the other one, and it's partly because we just don't have any information. Now, Biden did kind of come out and lean a little bit into like, yeah, we think it was ISIS. I don't know that I think that it was ISIS. I mean, I'm also divorced, and my first inkling was not, let me partner with ISIS and start up a killing spree.
Right. Yeah, I'm divorced too.
It was more along the lines of really just sucks to be divorced.
Yeah. I didn't. I'm not. I mean,
I'm not saying like. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say I was divorced about 2 years ago. It didn't occur to me to kill a lot of people after the
No.
divorce? Like you said, it just sucks.
Well, I mean, even if it had, I don't know that ISIS is the first place you'd go to for that. Like
That
even
too.
like lunatic killers, I don't think a lot of them just go, you know what? I could probably do this way better with ISIS's help. I don't
Well,
think
that's the
a
rub.
typical
So
thought.
right here, it says the videos are dark, so the suspect isn't seen, but can be heard talking about his divorce and his desire to kill members of his family before he ultimately decided to carry out the attack on Bourbon Street, according to the law enforcement sources. So,
Yeah,
like,
it was
can you imagine
funky.
that? Like, he's on video driving, and he's effectively saying, "Yeah, I was going to kill my wife and kids or family, but no, I know who's the better target. Just every random
I
American
hate
that I
to
can get
laugh
my
at
hands
it, but
on."
like it's such a horrible, like stupid. I
Yeah,
hate this kind of event because the problem is there are always so many stupid contradictions. Like this one, it's an absurd situation if you really line up everything that's going on. And then you add in Biden kind of, in my opinion, stirring the pot in a bad way. I think that there was not enough information to say that. I mean, even if they have more information, I don't think that this is something that looks clearly like anything that had anything to do with ISIS. I don't care if there was an ISIS flag in the back of the truck. I don't necessarily believe that's true, but that's not enough for me to go, yeah, you know what? ISIS caused this.
sounds like a man who's losing his mind.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
well, you get really messed up emotionally from like stuff that hits you hard. Not necessarily even a divorce, just something like a death or something that fundamentally changes your life in a way that is negatively affecting you. It can get you to a point where you're really upset. Some people have psychotic breaks. It sounds to me like this guy had a psychotic break. That doesn't like make this all right or anything. Like it's actually awful. It's terrible. And the fact that this guy did this is awful. And it's an example of a lot of the ways that the United States culture is seriously messed up. But I don't know. I got on Twitter and I saw a clip of Biden talking about ISIS and how this could possibly be linked to that in some way. And I was just like, it just immediately hit me wrong. I just like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, why would you say that if you don't know? To me, ISIS is a very serious like thing. Like it's a huge allegation to say that something like this had something to do with ISIS, especially if you've got videos of this man, going on about how he's going to kill his family, and then like, I have a better idea. It's I don't know.
That's what I mean.
Like,
It's very bizarre. I mean, I was looking for the flag thing. I don't see the flag in this article, and I mean, there was so much information that was coming out before. I mean, they might because I've seen two things. One was like a flag or something in his car associated with it. Then somebody else said, well, there was a jacket that wasn't. But I saw the video, and there was something that was laid out that looked like a flag or something that was in the back truck. I agree with you.
And
because
he framed it
another
as
one.
like possible ISIS connections. It was just such a weird.
And so it says New Orleans police have reviewed surveillance video that appears to show several people planning potential explosive devices in advance of a vehicle attack, which led them to believe that he was not solely responsible, sources said. Investigators are urgently working to identify the individuals. Okay, so my question is, okay, well, if you saw them planting what you believe to be explosive devices, I mean, that's either true or false, right? It says, well, why do you need the surveillance of that? Either the thing blew up or not, or you were able to just get the device. So it says review surveillance that appears to show people several planting explosive device. Okay, so that's weird. And like, what do you mean appears? Did they go off or not? I mean, if I am watching and I'm saying, okay, well, somebody is planning something, then I go to the scene to see, okay, is that a device or not? Or was that somebody, putting a beer can down that you believe was an explosive device? And then the other part to this, where they're effectively saying he's driving in the car, he's driving a truck to Texas. And it says right here, the FBI is studying the videos that President Biden talked about in his remarks. And it appears that they were recorded while driving from Texas to Louisiana. So he is on the fly doing this, but they're also saying that somebody was setting bombs in advance of him getting there, even though he's on the fly doing this. That's just super weird. I've never heard an ISIS person say Allah Akbar and that damn wife. You know what I mean? Like that's a bizarre correlation. Where it's like all praises be to God and F that wife. I've never heard that. I don't speak Arabic, so fair enough. Who knows?
Yeah, no. I mean, there's certain aspects of that make it impossible for you or I to hear that, but we would have known by now.
Yeah. He killed all of these people in a bomb blast, and damn it, his wife was the last thing that was on his lips as he did it. Yeah, I don't know anybody who does that. Like, this is a bizarre case for them to kind of make that. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense. That's all.
I don't like it. It comes off to me as like shit stirring, like trying to shit stir. Like I obviously the Democrats are not happy with the result of the election.
Oh, of course not.
Did I break up there?
No, you're fine.
Okay, all right. My computer did something weird, so I was
okay.
Obviously, the Democrats didn't love the result of the election, and there have been things that they've done which have set up some difficulties for Trump. Now, I'm not going to say that they wouldn't have done these things if Trump was not incoming, but they've done a lot of stuff, like say regarding the Ukraine war.
But how would this though affect Trump? How would this one affect Trump though?
Well, if they set up an ISIS threat, if they start linking things to ISIS here, and they get people talking about ISIS as though it's somehow performing terror attacks in the United States, I do see that as some kind of thing that might affect the Trump administration. I like various scare tactics. To me, it's something that it doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem like it doesn't make sense. Like ISIS is kind of a greatest hits scare at this point.
I can think of one thing. Well, Donald Trump, the last time he was in, he killed Obama's program to overthrow the Assad government. Now, apparently, now,
they could blame him for this then.
Well, no, because Joe Biden. Well, there were a few things. Apparently, they had 900 troops in Syria that now they're saying, oh, by the way, they were 2,000. We found 1,800 or what is that, 1,200 more troops out of the blue. They just found them. On top of that, if Donald Trump comes in with this notion of, well, I'm pulling the troops out of Syria, I'm done with this. I'm going to hand it over to Turkey or something like that. It may make them harder to do that now, because from their point of view is, well, hey, ISIS is still a threat. And so we can't pull American troops out. So we must defend the Kurds that are currently there for the SDF, meaning it could set a context. I've had this hypothesis that a lot of stuff that's been taking place around the globe has been in relation to Trump coming in office, where they're trying to Trump-proof the world in order to maintain the orthodoxy and the way things work. So in South Korea, they want to overthrow the government of South Korea because they don't know if the guy is going to be completely loyal. Especially considering the opposition is like, hey, why are we fighting China like this? Why are we allowing ourselves to be teed up to fight? This doesn't really make sense. So maybe they don't necessarily trust the democracy of South Korea, in which case they want a dictator in. The U.S. was very quiet as, Yoon Suk Yeol was overthrowing and declaring martial law. He is about to be arrested right now. In Europe, you've had nationalist governments that have been skeptical of war, either a Supreme Court or court case killing the election altogether in Romania, or what it is this kind of attempted overthrow of the Georgian government, with the French-born, many considered to be a spy, president or former president of Georgia, working with Europe to overthrow the democratically elected government, the Georgia Dream Party, as the prime minister, and for that matter, even to prevent the other president from coming in. These were nationalist governments that were skeptical of the war, and these governments had maximalist pressure put on those governments, whereas you get like Don Jr. saying, whoa, what the hell is going on in Europe? And why are you guys screwing with these elections that you guys are obviously screwing with? So, is this one of those things where these guys are taking various actions, and as you pointed out, Ukraine, where Joe Biden seems to be doing any and everything in his power to screw over Trump before Trump gets in order to keep that war going, or at the very least to escalate that war in some way, or to make it difficult for the war to be unraveled. So it could be, you might be right. You could be right. This could be shit stirring with this idea, like feeding into this kind of foreign policy thing that Joe Biden and the Democrats and liberals want to keep into effect, especially with the protection of the Kurds. If the U.S. pulls out, that becomes very speculative.
And the thing is, I don't think Donald Trump is necessarily going to handle all of, let's say they didn't do all of that stuff. I don't know that he'd do a great job with any of these situations. But with these things, I don't know. It's such a obviously the changing of power in the United States is a big thing. It does trigger events worldwide. But a lot of these events seem like they're setting up difficulties for Trump specifically. And I think that I don't think that it's because like I said, it's kind of a greatest hits, the ISIS thing. It's one of the greatest hits, bad things could happen thing that the president might say at this point. And I just don't see the ISIS connection in either of these things. And why would you bring it up with the Cybertruck one? That was, more of maybe a media creation, but still, why is that being brought up at all amongst either of these events? It's just such a weird thing. And I hate to be conspiratorial. I don't like to do that. I don't like to make these types of assertions because I have no evidence for it. But in my gut, it just comes off as odd. It comes off as very strange. I don't understand why you would link these things to ISIS. And then you I think put out a very comprehensive list of things that are happening. Particularly, I've been thinking more about the South Korea, the coup and how that's related. I do think that's
Trump
related. These things, these things they sound related because whether they're related because people are just reacting to the changing power in the United States, or they're color revolution-esque events. I don't know, but they're definitely related. I do think there's a decent chance that they're color revolution adjacent actions. I do think that there is some degree of the United States pushing things in certain directions and trying to get certain outcomes. And I do think that it's trying to set up Trump for failure. If I'm honest, do I think that he would necessarily succeed? I don't know, but I do see some kind of spite. There is obviously Trump is not a predictable quantity in a lot of respects. He is not automatically for the United States imperial order in the way that the financial sector and the state previously necessarily want it to exist. He's not necessarily he likes going into North Korea and trying to create peace. That pisses everybody off. That pisses people off that are pretty ardent supporters of Trump in other respects. I don't know. I just don't. I look at it like it seems related, and again, I don't want to pretend like I am an expert at all of these events. I'm not, but they just stack up. Yeah, they stack up in a way where it doesn't. It's all of this crap. None of this crap was happening before the votes were counted, and then suddenly all of this crap is happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And South Korea thing is a really good example. Donald Trump wanted to make peace. Everybody flipped out.
Yeah.
And then you get this situation where the guy's like, I'm declaring martial law. It's like, where the hell did that come from? It's just out the blue.
Yeah.
It
just happened one day.
Yeah.
It was such a weird. Watching that happen was so weird because that guy, when you talk about presidents and countries, world leaders, these people don't act on a whim. They don't just wake up one day. People, for instance, Putin didn't go, you know what? I want to invade a smaller country today. It's not, they do these things because of events that lead up to it. The revolution in Ukraine, the color revolution in Ukraine in 2014, and the events following that led up to Russia having to act, whether people like it or not. That's completely fine to have that debate, but it's something that in world events, that would be the reaction that a rational entity would have.
Right.
What the hell inspired martial law in South Korea? What the hell led up to that? It didn't seem like anything was really going on there.
Yeah, it was weird. It was very weird. Yeah, I've had people on to talk about it. It was very weird. I have a hard time believing that the U.S. didn't at the very least know about it. And apparently that had been like a year in the making. I mean, like taking people prisoner, disappearing various politicians. I mean, just astonishing stuff. Let's get domestic for a bit.
It was kept
I got to bring
in a way. We didn't know about that stuff until after.
Yeah, it was just after the fact when we found out. It was just super weird. It was very weird. I want to get your take on something that pissed me off. I hated the video that I did on it because I was too annoyed. In that video, I was just angry. So I want to play this clip. This is Simone Sanders, and I want listen to what she says because it's almost like she's come. You've seen this clip, okay? Good. She's come to this appraisal. She's come to this appraisal. Now, in one case, and I need to find that clip. The Democrats were saying they need to do so, like they need to be more illegal in regards to the way they deal with super PACs. And it's like, okay, this is outrageous. It's like, yeah, we need to have more coordination with super PACs, which is completely illegal. In this one, she's like, we need a workers' movement. Now, for people like you and me who scream that this is obviously what the Democratic Party should be, what they used to be, and what they fundamentally abandoned. And even when people rear their heads up like a Sanders, they did any and everything in their power with the entire weight of the Democratic Party to crush Sanders. And now, after losing, where millions of people just said, screw it, I'm not showing up, Simone Sanders comes out and says this to Republican Michael Steele, no less, who in no way agrees with this take, but whatever. He's shaking his head. Let's play the clip. I want to get your take on this.
Well, he claims to at the end.
About organize. I mean, people often talk about, I mean, this has literally been going on since Fred Hampton, but I mean, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Dr. King, right? Heck, Bernie Sanders talked about organizing across class as well, because the reality is when you align just along, if we're going to just specifically talk about white people for a second, okay? If we just talk about aligning just across race, we are seeing the divisions happening right now. The white billionaires, Elon Musk is not saying, yes, I'm fighting for the little guy. Yes, I'm out here, looking out for the forgotten white man. He is saying, these folks are mediocre and let me get somebody else to do it, which is why folks, white, Black, Latino, Native American, Asian American, and Pacific Islander, and otherwise, we have to look at organizing across class, okay? Because the reality is what they said, as Michael said, what they said about Black people all those years ago, and they're still trying to say it about us, to be very clear. Now they're saying it out loud about people who are not Black, about you, okay? First they came for us, now they're coming for you. You are not exempt, boo-boo. Let's come together.
I couldn't have said it better. Church on Sunday mornings.
Couldn't have said it better. Republican Michael Steele. Why is Michael Steele there? Like, you talking about yes man for the Democratic Party? That's so sad. Michael Steele didn't used to be that guy, man. Michael Steele used to be the head of the Republican National Committee. I mean, he was the guy who was in charge of the Republican National Committee when I was coming up in my politics. And now he is sitting there like
like an SNL skit.
Yeah, right. It looks like a SNL skit. Like, this guy's a Republican and he's just a yes man at this point. It's like he's a battered man. That's what it feels like. It feels like he's a battered man that he's given a paycheck and they sit him up there as a fixture to be the opposition to whatever the Democratic Party is saying to Michael Steele as the opposition. Do you know my first realization about Syria came from Michael Steele? That is not the same guy. I remember when Michael Steele, Chris Matthews was talking about how awesome Obama handled Libya, how great Libya turned out, and all of this nonsense. And Michael Steele, at the very end of the segment, with like 20 seconds, he says, have you seen Syria? Have you seen Libya lately? And the clip goes off. And I said, what is Michael Steele talking about? What do you mean, have I seen Syria? Oh my God, they're selling slaves. It became that. That is a different guy. That is a different guy. That is a beaten man. That is a beaten, broken man. Give me a take on that clip. I'm sorry. I don't mean to emasculate Michael Steele, but the idea that this Republican is sitting there like a workers' rights movement is just astonishing. Just astonishing.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better at church. I couldn't. I don't. That comes off as the most absurd thing, just because of how silly it sounds out of his mouth in particular.
Yeah.
But really, the silly thing is Simone Sanders. Like, she kind of managed to really say the I don't want to say the dumb thing, because obviously I agree with what she's saying, but the fact is, this goes along with the Cenk Uygur stuff that's been happening recently.
Yes.
These people
Yes.
suddenly have all the right ideas in their heads. How'd that happen? I don't know. We lost. We lost, but you know what? We're the rational losers here. We're the rational losers. We understand. We know how to take the information presented to us and learn from it. Never mind the fact that it is the stuff that you've been shitting on for years and years and years. You and I both have dealt with this.
Yes.
We have both said very similar things, and it didn't start recently.
Yes.
We've dealt with the followings of these types of people. We've dealt with things that they've said in the media. They cause arguments in our directions when we say things like that. Somehow we're jingoist racists.
Yes, because we care about workers'
did I
rights,
get
yeah.
my?
You froze slightly, but you're fine.
Yeah,
Look, you've
my
had no issues.
Yeah, my connection is getting very bad. I don't know what's going on.
So you're fine. You're fine. You're fine.
But yeah.
No, and I agree with you. My audience hates Cenk Uygur, and I came out with a video, and I was like, "Well, on this, Uyghur's right." And my audience is like, "How dare you, sir?" He's right. You should be trying to make inroads with the other groups. The issue is, as you point out, he's been shitting on people who's been saying that for the last several years. Like, meaning when as I point out to people on my show, I bring people who are on the left and the right, and I have those conversations. Sometimes you have fights with those people, but you need to be able to try to make inroads and try to reach, because it's very possible that you go into a space and no one has ever heard that argument before. Like, it's possible you go on somebody's show and they have never heard a take short of the Charlie Kirk take, or the short of the, I don't know, any random Republican take that you might hear. And they're like, "Hey, I agree with that guy." You might not even need the guy to agree with everything, just the openness, just this, where you can get your argument in where it's not immediately rejected because they've seen you at the very least be willing to have a conversation with a right winger or something to that effect. I think it's right. I think, to your point, that's not and hasn't been his point of view. And I'll go further. The shit that he's taken from the left right now is his bed that he's made. Like, meaning the cultish left that have been losing their minds about the fact that he would take any point of view that is different or deviates from their own point of view, whether Uygur realizes it or not. And I know he gets pissed off at it. That was him, too.
He's partially responsible for that media demographic. Now, I don't like calling that area of people like a legitimate political movement. I don't think that it is. I think that it's a bunch of people who watch internet content all day and get mad when the thing that they're consuming isn't exactly right. The recipe changed a little bit and it doesn't taste as good. That's what I think that is, personally. And he is, as many of these people who are saying things like that, Simone Sanders, like, massively responsible for curating that demographic, for creating that group of people, or at least the place for them to congregate that unites all of them, that places them in opposition with anybody who says anything that they don't like. Oh, they started using artificial sweeteners in the ding dongs. I don't like it as much. That's what it is. And they're responsible for it. And that's why I've been mad at these people saying this crap. It's not because I disagree with it. I agree with it. Every word they're saying, it's completely right. Well, maybe not every word, but a lot of the words they're saying are completely right. Like, yes, the left is like nuts. but they're responsible for it. They've created that marketing demographic. They've marketed themselves to it. They've, made money off of it, and they have helped create a demand for it. Like they've marketed it into existence. It's them who have done
yeah.
this.
Yeah.
It's not,
keep in mind,
it's not.
No, please. No, please finish.
It's not like, this is what my book, Custom Reality and You, starts addressing. I call the demographic that we're talking about, the cultish left. It's an identity and it's a community. It's the commodified version of both of those things. They create a place for them to live. They created not live like a house, but like exist. And they create like a means to have meaning, for them to have identity and for them to be something. And the fact is, he's taken part in cultivating that in the world. And then I don't understand why he doesn't get why those people that he's spent this time, like, he's not the only one, and Simone Sanders is not the only one. There's a lot of these people, and they seem shocked that they are not, that they're not being like immediately followed. Like, they spent years and years and years giving these people identity and community around the idea that they are completely right, and any deviation from it is just dire and horrible. They're Nazis now. Anybody who isn't them is a Nazi. And I don't understand how they think, I'm gonna just pivot now. I'm like, they think that the problem is also Trump won. Like, it's a very obvious social fact that the majority of the people in the United States are not the cultish left that they curate.
Right.
And they're like, oh, wait, I kind of, maybe this might be a little more lucrative over here for right now. I think that's, whether that's a conscious choice or not, I'm not alleging, but I think that it's there. And it's read my book. I'm in the process of writing another big book. I write the little booklets for all of my documentaries, but I'm writing a big book called The Road to Fandom, where I'm sort of criticizing this on a more extensive level and connecting all of my little things from Custom Reality and You and Woke Ouroboros. It's about fandom. This is ultimately fandom. They have created a product for people to be fans of, and they have changed the product. And New Coke didn't go over well for a reason. It's because people wanted old Coke. It's not necessarily because New Coke was bad. It's because Coke was a certain thing and they changed it.
What's wild to me is, because I agree with you. They've cultivated. Look, audiences are that way. I strongly suspect. How can I say this? YouTube channels are weird things because it's like they are the energy of those channels. It's almost like they're different worlds, and each world comes across on some level because of the host. And if you go from one to the next, they can be radically different in regards to what is allowed, what is normal. There's some channels that I would call just blatantly racist. There are there are. Has zero issue with it, and the audience gets it. The audience knows we can be blatantly racist here, and the host is okay with it. And there are other channels where if you say something like, "Well, trans women are not real women," they'll say you're transphobic and get the hell out of here. Like, it's so radically different in regards to how far these channels can be. What's wild to me is that, like you said, after spending 10 years cultivating a brand and a thought process and everything else, for them to deviate even a small amount, like for them to say, I don't think kids should be sent to trans surgeries. And they were like, when did Cenk Uygur become transphobic? And it's like, what? Saying something that I think is like outlandish, with this idea of a child who is not even allowed to drink can make the choice that is going to dramatically affect their life for the rest of their life. That is somehow transphobic. You're out of your mind. And yet, when Uygur makes the point of view, they attack him for it. And then all of a sudden, it's like Uygur is pivoting to the right. Uygur is becoming a Nazi. Uygur is this, and it's like, okay, you people have lost your mind. Like, but that's what I mean, right? It's like you said, the small flavor change is too much. Whereas instead of them look at it and say, okay, well, that's his point of view on that. I agree with him. I disagree with him.
That's the thing. I'm extremely pro trans people. I am myself. I identify as non-binary. When you read my thing, you say the word they. Like all that shit is in my head. And when I hear that issue, the idea of surgeries on kids, I hear two things. I hear either it's not happening, there's no evidence for that, or it's good. It would be good if it was happening.
Right.
And it's like, no, it's not. These people can't consent to sex. They can't drink. They can't take drugs.
We can chop
the drugs that are legal anyways.
Okay. Yeah.
These are things that are consent oriented. And to be frank, you are not developed as a human being as a child. And I am not saying that I am against anything. I just made it very clear that I am very much for.
Yeah.
But these are permanent decisions. And I don't like the idea of permanent decisions being made. And this gets me in trouble. And I like, with the preface I gave you, this gets me in trouble. So it's
I know, but think how weird that is, though. Like, that's what I mean, right? Like, I think somehow they've conflated civil rights as if these things are one-to-one with these kind of gender issues. And kind of, but not really. I mean,
in certain ways, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But not in that way.
Yeah, it's very different. Like, if I think, okay, this person who's Black, trans, Chinese, Japanese is somehow inferior. Okay, then fair enough. Call the person racist, transphobic, or whatever else. That's a mindset that's, that is in that person's head that has nothing to do with the reality of events that's taking place in regards to who that person is.
Yes.
If I say I am uncomfortable with a child potentially being pushed by their parents to get a surgery that is going to scar them for life, well, that's not me being transphobic. That's not a civil rights issue. That's a argument that I'm making, saying I think this is outrageous. And
I also think that it's actually not beneficial to trans people. Like, if you have a wave of people who get surgeries who regret it later in life, that they go, I wasn't old enough to make that decision. That's going to be ultimately bad for trans people. That is going to make the whole thing look less legitimate. I very much think that that's important too. So whether it is or isn't happening, if they want to outlaw it, like a lot of people will say, it's not even happening. Sure, fine. Outlaw it then. What harm does that do? You know what I mean? It's such a dumb issue. We're obviously talking. Yeah, no, I know. But here's the thing. We talk about this type of a thing, and obviously we're getting wrapped up in it a little bit. But the point is, this is us having a conversation that is not blatantly, anti anything other than just wanting people of adult consenting age to make that decision. That's the only thing we're talking about here. And it will, I guarantee you, this is going to kick up problems now that we've gotten into it.
But that's the one. I mean, that's shocking to me. Like the way it's gone too far. It's just gone too far. People should be.
What I'm getting at, though, is that these guys, the Annika Sparians, the Cenk Uygurs, the Simone Sanders, they set this up. They set this up. They set up a situation where people like yourself and myself can't have this conversation, and then they want to have that conversation. And it's like, well, what do you expect to happen? I just don't. They act so bewildered by the response to this. And it's like, what did you think was going to happen? You've made videos attacking people on this thing. And now you want to go, oh, well, maybe I was wrong about that in some way. I don't necessarily hate trans people, but, I don't know about this thing. It's just, it comes off disingenuous. Well, I might agree with the idea of having the conversation. I clearly agree with that idea. And I agree with the idea of having a lot of other conversations with things that I think would not land in my corner, at least what you would expect my corner to be based on this conversation. I don't think that I would get my way every single time, and I don't even know if my way is the right way. I'm not pretending that I am a clairvoyant. It's just I'm not omniscient. I'm not God. I'm not right about everything. But it's important to be able to have the conversations, because there are things like this where there's nuances that are important to observe. Like, I really don't think that somebody who can't legally have sex should make decisions like that modify, or should be given the opportunity to make the decisions. That could very well be a push in certain areas. A doctor saying this is the right thing to do, a parent saying this is the right thing to do. I don't think that's a good thing. I think that's a bad thing.
Agree.
Like, it's not because I'm anti anything. It's because I think that these are people who might have buyer's remorse, and buyer's remorse is not a good thing for the trans movement, in my opinion.
Peter, 1,000% agree with you, man. Before I close it, I got to get to the story, because you hit me up with this story. And this was something I had been watching myself. And, I was uncomfortable with this when I saw it. And I think my reason for uncomfortable with it is because it's like, dude, you get like $10 billion of taxpayer money. Why does the citizenry have to go out and do your jobs? And so it's like, so Rhea, just to play the video one more time. This is Guardian Angels who are now back on New York subways because they've become so dangerous, effectively death traps, for 15 minutes at a time as they're going from post to post to post, and there are no cops apparently in the subways. So these good Samaritans have decided that they needed to go out like Batman and patrol Gotham or New York to ensure that people aren't being tossed off of subways into trains, or being stabbed, or for that matter, being set on fire, all of which have taken place over the last couple of weeks. Just astonishing.
Well, day and night patrols, 3-person patrols, we're all together. We're walking through the cars, which is something the police no longer do. Notice there are no mental health workers. There are no crisis intervention. They have all these fancy names. I never see them. And we spend millions of dollars on my day. Our job is, A, do a wellness check on a homeless person. If they're homeless or emotionally disturbed, see if they're okay. If all of a sudden we walk into a situation where there's an episode, which oftentimes happens, we have to calm it down. A lot of times, these homeless and emotionally disturbed persons, they know of the guardian angels. We can have a calming effect. We can also bring the situation to the attention of cops on the platform. If there are cops, you're going to probably see them.
I want to get a shout out to the unsung actor of that scene, the New York accent.
No, I was literally thinking about how he's going to do an impression of this guy when we were done talking.
Right. It's like Spider-Man in New York City. It's like New York City is like a character, even though you don't really see it. That accent is a character in that skit, like nobody's business. It's almost like it has a leading role. Shout out to that guy in that accent.
I think he's bad, and I don't like him very much. That's my favorite part in Spider-Man, when Jim Norton says that.
I don't like him very much.
I don't like him very much.
Give me your take on that. It's inspiring but depressing. Inspiring but depressing.
Well, these guys are trained in de-escalation. So immediately they're in a better position than any other person on the railway. And the thing is, that's good. You want people who are trained in de-escalation taking control of this type of situation, because we have stuff like the Daniel Penny thing where somebody dies for no reason. Like, was it wrong for Daniel Penny to intervene? Like, just that basic question? Absolutely not. It was not wrong. Was it wrong for Daniel Penny to intervene like that? Absolutely. Like, there was no reason for that man to die. He was clearly mentally ill. There was a serious thing going on that was not just him being aggressive. It was him having an episode of some kind. There's no reason for that person to die. There's something that can be done about that, as opposed to killing him. That being said, people are fed up. I would rather have the guardian angels, these guys trained in de-escalation, taking control of these situations, than a Daniel Penny, or in some cases the cops, because the cops don't exactly de-escalate very well either. But like you said before you put the clip on, why is that the citizen's job? Why does somebody have to be Batman? Why does somebody have to do that? The New York City Police Department is one of the most well-funded organizations in the world. They have a budget of a small country's military, and they have every bit of jurisdiction to do anything in any of these situations. There's no questions asked. And yet, you know, in that video where we saw that woman get burned to death, we saw a cop walk by several times like, something's happening. I mean, there's a serious problem in that institution, well beyond the corruption that has been previously. Like, they're just, what are they doing with that money? Where is that money going? I like, and on top of that, why aren't they affected in any? Why are these people in no way affected by any of these situations that happen to the point where they basically ignore it? Yes, like you said, it is in some ways inspiring to hear these great New Yorkers talking about what needs to happen here. You know, it's in some ways like that guy's an old school New York motherfucker, you know? and it's cool to see, and it's nice to see that there are people who care. I love that there's people who care. That makes me happy. But at the same time, they have to step up and make it known that they are a presence, because everything else has failed. Everything. Like, there's no aspect of that situation that is reliably safe. And that's, you know, in a modern society, in a allegedly first world country, that's, I mean, a serious problem. And something I've repeated a lot this morning. We are having serious problems. There are serious institutional breakdowns, not like they were, you know, well put together in the past either. They've done a sort of militaristic means of control. But here, I love that this guy's doing this. I love that the guardian angels are stepping up and saying de-escalation tactics, that's the way to go. I love that. But it shouldn't, there's no situation where the guardian angels should even be necessary.
Man, I agree with you. I like I said, it's inspiring but sad.
Yeah.
It puts you in the mind of like somebody's house on fire. The fire department doesn't come. People just get a bunch of buckets and fill it and just are throwing it at the fire. It's like, okay, that's nice. That's good that people can come together like that. But oh man, they shouldn't have to do that. They shouldn't have to do that.
When the entire idea of GoFundMe, like, it's wonderful that somebody gets medical treatment. I love it. I love seeing that. But at the same time, why is medical treatment something that we have to raise money for?
We spend them like trillions. We spend more than any other country, like on healthcare, and yet we die 10 years younger. And like you said, GoFundMe accounts in order to pay for the healthcare that we're spending trillions of dollars for. Peter, man, thank you for this, man. Always appreciate you joining me, Peter. Really good conversation. I enjoyed this conversation today. It's grim.
I always enjoy a good conversation with you. Let me quickly push. Horseshoe theory is right, but not how you think. It's
where can people find it, by the way?
It's on Amazon as a book and on YouTube as a documentary you can watch for free.
Oh, okay. Amazon and on YouTube. And the name of it one more time.
Horseshoe Theory is right, but not how you think. Last time I was on, I sold a bunch of copies of it. So it's like, maybe I should do that.
Oh, did you? That's good.
I did. I sold a bunch of copies of it. So I thought, actually, man, you know what?
You have no idea how glad I'm here how glad I am to hear that. Because oftentimes I think to myself, I'm begging people to come on and they get nothing out of it.
Well, no, that's not true. And also, you were talking about earlier, you were promoting I can't remember whether it was Patreon or just liking the video, but like you were saying, I don't like that transition. The thing is, you know, this stuff takes time, it takes effort. It sucks to have to promote it, but like you and I are both YouTube people, and we don't exist in a situation where we're part of an entity that promotes that aspect of it for us. It sucks. I don't like the business aspect of anything, but I mean, fact is, people should like the video. People should be.
Yeah, I want them to. It's just degrading to have to look. I don't like ask people anything, just in general.
No,
right?
neither do I.
I like to be able to deal with it on my own. it feels like a degrading experience. Like there's some people who don't care. Like I've seen some YouTubers who have no issue just like begging their audience for money over and over and over. And like you hear the audience like, God, man, every time the guy comes on, he's begging for money. Or like even some of the like Twitch streamers. Like have you ever come across this thing called what is it called? NPCs. So there's some Twitch streamers who would pretend like they're living computer characters.
I know what you're talking about.
And you send them money, and they would give like certain sayings. So like one guy pretends
like
to be
doing
Black
that
Spider.
repetitive. This,
yeah, it's the most bizarre thing.
Very
I've ever
nice,
seen in
very
my life.
nice.
It's bizarre.
It's very weird.
But they make millions. Some of them used to make millions of dollars. Like, and I'm like, that's how they decided to make cash? That's such a degrading experience. Like where it's like you send them like $1 and they'd be like, oh, thank you very much. And so they keep sending them, saying, thank you very much.
And
then
they keep doing this. This is
they
the
do it
part
for like
that
an
weirds
hour.
me out the most. This repeated standing animation that they do. It messes me up.
It's so bizarre. The one Black Spider-Man, he did it in public, and it's the funniest shit in the world.
Yeah, I remember that video specifically.
Start fucking with him. He gets into a fight. There was one where security guards tell him to leave. He's like, I'm gonna do my own thing, and he just keeps doing it. Like as the security guard and the cops have been called. It's bizarre, man.
Yeah, we live in a weird world.
Peter, man, thank you for this, man. I really appreciate it. Peter Coffin, he's a journalist with over 250,000 YouTube subscriber, podcaster, and author. In their book, Custom Reality and You, they explore a world where profit is the driving force. You can follow Peter on YouTube and Twitter at Peter Coffin and purchase their books on Amazon, and that is including his Horseshoe Theory book. Thank you, man. You have a fantastic new year. I hope you have a good one.
You as well. Thank you very much.
All right, we have come to the end of the road, and let's go into super chats. And guys, look, I definitely appreciate you guys. You, like I say, you guys could be anywhere, and so I appreciate the fact that you decide to spend your mornings with me. And this is coming off the radio show. This is trying to make this thing into an actual thing that happens 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday. Hello, high water, short of death. The show takes place, meaning it's my priority. I got to be honest. I am trying to figure out where I'm going to move to. I am homeless, kind of. I mean, there are levels of homeless, right? I just mean it. I don't have. I haven't decided upon where it was going to be. I moved to DC specifically for the job. The radio job was the reason why I was in DC. And once the radio job left, at that point, you're untethered. You can pretty much go anywhere. And so from my point of view, looking to cut costs in a radical sense, it may be cheaper to basically live abroad, believe it or not. I don't know yet. I'm still making the choice. I've always wanted to live for an extended period abroad. I had the opportunity to do so when I was with my ex-wife. We are no longer together, so that is no longer the case in regards to doing this with somebody else. But there are places that are cheaper, hell of a lot cheaper than living in America, that I am definitely thinking about going to. I don't know. I'll give you a prize. Either way, I want to thank all of you for all the support you've given. You've kept the show ticking along. Regardless of where I go, the show is going to be a priority at this point. So you are going to continue to get content Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. If anything comes up, I will give you a heads up about what is going on. Even if it's an airplane trip to get from point A to point B, still the show takes priority in regards to ensuring that it continues consistently. I've had a poll, as you all know. I asked the audience, I was pointed out that I wanted to increase the revenue that I was raising for the show. And one of the ways that I was thinking about doing was offering chess lessons in one sense. In the other sense, chess games. So going with the notion that you can challenge me in Blitz on chess nights, a game, I'm thinking $3 for a 3-minute Blitz game. You will lose. Most likely, because fucking awesome. But at the very least I used to be. I'm not at my peak, but I still have residual powers. But nevertheless, it may just be a fun way for the audience to get engaged. Members are free, by the way. Any member can challenge free of charge. I said that in the beginning, even with the membership thing. But people who are not members and just want to get games in, that may be a way to do it. 90% or more were either neutral or thought it was a good idea in order to build revenue. So I do think I'm going to start having periodic chess nights. I don't know when those are going to be. I'm thinking Sunday. If you guys are interested in that, send me an email. We can set up a chess night where people can come in and we can kind of get some games in, almost like a fundraiser. Beyond that, I just want to give you my thanks. You guys have stuck with me on the show, and I do appreciate it. Let's go into chats. All chats will be read, so let's do that. CIA inspired. Sparky, it crossed my mind. It did cross my mind. I look, man, I've gotten cynical covering politics. I give you an example. In the media today, you're going to see reports. Putin cuts off gas to Europe, or Putin cuts off gas to its allies or people who are allies in Europe. None of that's true, by the way. Ukraine has decided to shut off gas going into Europe. And it is very possible that the US pushed Ukraine to do it because it was going to damage Europe as a whole, but also damage the various countries that were very close and didn't necessarily go in line with the war, or for that matter, go in line with the sanctions, meaning Hungary and Slovakia. Now, that is going to cause consequences for Ukraine because Ukraine was getting part of that gas also, and they were getting transit fees for that gas going into Europe during the course of the entire war. And so the media is going to report this in a way that is fundamentally warped. Now, somebody who covers media and has noticed this trend for it to lie, for it to obfuscate, for it to not necessarily tell the whole story or drop context, you can imagine that after several years, you get somewhat cynical in regards to what's true and where the actual floor is. Clearly, a man murdered a bunch of people. Clearly, the guy is saying, or at the very least, the feds are putting out that he was affiliated with, I can't even say affiliated, inspired by a terror group. So what's the floor to that? I don't know. We're going to see the investigation, see how far the investigation goes, but clearly parts of the story are just weird. Like the idea that they're saying, well, we believe that there was somebody else that was working with him, that he wasn't a lone gunman, that there might have been bombs put out. It's like, okay, well, did you find the bombs? If you see somebody putting them out there, why don't you just go to the location, pick it up, and see whether it's an explosive device? Why are you saying appears to be? Like the appears to be thing is very weird. And then to say that he's in the car on camera, I guess, working this out, saying, yeah, I was going to whack my family, but I decided to, just whack a bunch of people in general. Okay, that's a little weird. I was looking for the flag thing. Looking at the video, it looked like it was a flag in the truck, but I'm not seeing it in the article that I was referencing. So I guess put it in quotes until further investigation takes place. The reality of it is this took place yesterday, so the investigation is still taking place going into today. I'll keep you apprised as we find out more. ISIS has been a U.S.-Israeli affiliate for many years. That's true. They don't go after Israel, by the way. No, they do not. No, they do not. No, they do not. Isn't that peculiar? Isn't that peculiar? Especially considering that it is clear as day that the jihadists in Syria are working on behalf of Turkey. It's very peculiar. The article that I was referencing is this one, because Israel outed this, and you can imagine for Erdogan, who's been going around saying that Netanyahu is Hitler, this is a humiliating headline. Turkey refutes reports that Erdogan is in contact with Israel over Syria. And yet, they find ways to deconflict constantly. They find ways to constantly deconflict. But supposedly, nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see here, folks. I think Israel is right. I don't think they're lying at all about this. It humiliates Erdogan. Fair enough. Tell the truth, shame the devil, is what it is. It seems like there's some level of coordination that is indeed taking place. So yes, Sparky, you're absolutely right. If you can't trust Erdogan, who can you trust? Yeah. Nothing needs to be said on that one. Vengeance for the change of the Light Brigade. Charge of the Light Brigade. So, yeah, this goes into what Mark was saying, that it looks like they're building up for some kind of offensive. Mark is right. There seems to be, Joe Biden has been spending a lot of money at the very end in regards to trying to get equipment and everything else into Ukraine. I suspect what they're believing is that, when conflicts wind down, they tend to get even more bloody. It's because they're jockeying for position. And the position is in response to some kind of negotiation that they believe is about to take place. So if Joe Biden believes that a negotiation is going to take place, he's probably dumping all of these weapons, money, and everything else for one last charge in order to get some kind of position that they weren't able to get over the last several years with a much better military. So yeah, there's that. Erdogan should saturate Syria with Turkish army peacekeepers, quote unquote, before the U.S. figures out how to stop him. So that is fascinating, right? So the U.S. has all of a sudden found 2,000 troops that were in Syria. The U.S. has also been putting in a lot of equipment, military equipment, into Syria. And so you can imagine where that equipment is going. That equipment is going to the U.S., especially in the context of the SDF. Now, if you're Trump, and Trump has said before, I want to pull the troops out. Is the ISIS thing being played up with the idea that Trump would not be able to pull the troops out? Because understand, if you pull the troops out, the Kurds are defenseless. I mean, yeah, they can defend themselves, they can fight, everything else, but it's one thing to attack a Kurdish troop or group that Turkey and the terrorists backed by Turkey are calling terrorists. It's another thing to go after that group if it's indeed with the U.S. backing it, meaning they may feel some kind of way about attacking a U.S. base. They may not feel some kind of way about attacking a Kurdish or SDF base. So Peter might not necessarily be wrong that the whole point of playing up the ISIS angle, as opposed to this guy is mentally ill, is to try to force Trump in some way to remain or keep a contingent of forces in Syria that would allow the U.S. to exert influence, because the U.S. is also in Syria themselves, but also to exert influence in the group that the Turkish considers to be terrorists. I don't know. It's hard to see what's happening in regards to what's in their heads. You can only really see what's taking place on the ground. But it is clear as day that the U.S. is putting in a hell of a lot more equipment into Syria, and may even, on some level, be adding more troops. I don't know. It's fascinating. Like I said, Syria has gotten immensely more complicated as we go on. And would Syria allow Turkish peacekeepers? Oh, hell yeah. You can make an argument that the jihadists are Turkish peacekeepers, as they create all sorts of havoc in that country. President Jafar, Americans hate each other naturally. No need to scapegoat Americans love to deflect. Do we hate each other naturally? I mean, there are elements of it, right? But can't you say that in every country? There are elements of the country that hate each other? Yeah, I don't know. That one's, yeah, I'm leave that one without comment. But President Jafar, yeah, I guess you have a point. Alexander G, super chat. Thank you, Alexander. Leave a comment. I love the comments. But thank you, man. I really do appreciate it. NOK, I don't know what NOK is. Is that another super chat? Alexander K. Thank you, man. Good looking out. Thank you for that. Sir Bike Salat. A Tesla catching fire at a dealership in Georgia and a Trump hotel in 2025 is already becoming a great year for Soleimani in 2020. MK Ultra and New Orleans. Oh man, I don't know. That's the rub with terrorist attacks, right? When the guy dies in the inn, you can can cast it any way you want to cast it. You can spin it however you want to spin it to whatever effect you're trying to reach. So I don't know. Honest to God, don't know. I mean, let's be honest though. Teslas do blow up. I mean, like the argument, and I don't necessarily take Elon Musk's word on this front because all things being equal, it's humiliating for Tesla to blow up. At the same token, it's a massive coincidence that is taking place in front of a Trump hotel. That is very coincidental. I'll put it that way. But the fact that Musk is talking about the design of the car, saying that the explosion goes up. Okay, well, why does the explosion need to go up? And, you know, the fact that you're design it that way kind of indicates that there may be foreknowledge of the fact that your cars every so often blow up. Is that something you want to own? No. No, you do not want to own that at all. No. Chimamoto, I don't know. It just feels like the world is done. Look at it this way. If you lived during the Second World War, let's say the second year of the Second World War, you would think the world was coming to an end. You would think it would be the apocalypse. I mean, if you lived anywhere in Europe at that point, and you got the opportunity to walk through, you would have thought you were living in an apocalypse. You had a group of Nazis. And keep in mind, you know, when people say it's fair game to kill a Nazi, why are they saying that? They're saying that that's how bad Nazis are. Like, where they're so bad that they've become almost like demonic in the way that we think about Nazi Germany and what they were willing to do and what they went through, meaning what they were willing to put on various people, especially if you're talking about the Eastern Front. Because it wasn't like the Western Front. There was this, you know, yeah, Nazis were Nazis, but the way they looked at Russians, Poles, Jews, you know, it was a different animal. There was no out. There was no, okay, I surrender, take me in. It was, these people need to be killed. These people are rats. They're less than human beings. Like, there have been worse times. I guess that's my point. That's my point. And look, I get the feeling we're in prehistory. That at some point, we're going to look back on this and it's going to look like, I can't believe we were living that way. It's either going to be that, or this shit ends, because we can't keep it going on like this. Something has to give. We appreciate you, Jamal. Please don't stop doing what you're doing. I've been listening to you for now and have learned much. Oh, thanks, man. Keep it up. Take us with you every step. Oh, thank you, Minnie. I appreciate it. Oh, Mimi. I'm not stopping. The show is my priority at this point. This is show number, 69? If that's not evidence of making it a priority, I don't know what is. Monday through Friday, dragging my ass up at 5 a.m. in the morning is not an easy thing. I know some people have worse jobs, so fair enough. But no, Mimi, I'm not going anywhere. My job is to be here and do the news, and damn it, that's what I am going to do. And I appreciate all of you joining me on this escapade as I do the news. Me moving somewhere, it's not going to change that. Like I said, moving somewhere. Look, the reason why I'm bringing this up, and I have another show I need to get to, but it is very expensive to live in the States. Anybody who lives in the States knows that. There's certain countries that it's cheaper to live in. It wouldn't necessarily be moving to for good. It will be moving to for a period of time. If you're looking at somewhere like Malaysia, you can live in Malaysia for about $500 for about a month. Like if you're paying for like a property in there to live for that month. Okay, well, if you're looking at the United States, you're talking about at least $1,500 in Richmond for an apartment. You may be able to get them for cheaper depending upon the neighborhood that you're finding them in. But obviously, $1,500 to $500 is a massive difference, especially if you're not bringing in a huge amount and you're trying to pivot over to the channel. Same thing is true for food expense, Uber expense, those type of things. The complication comes in for healthcare. That's where it gets complicated. Because if you need, for me, as you know, or many people who watch the channel know, I have medical treatments that I have to get several times a week. And because of the way insurance works in the United States, if I was living abroad, like if I was a citizen of a European country, that stuff would be covered. As an American, that stuff is not covered. You have to pay that stuff out of pocket. And so that part adds the complication more to it. But for an expense, it's far cheaper to live in other countries. Just depends on the country. Malaysia is much cheaper. Vietnam is much cheaper. Even Albania, which shocked the hell out of me last night when I was looking over it. Even that's cheaper. Like, you'd be shocked at the number of places that you can live that are far cheaper than living in the United States. But typically, the way it happens is it just so happens that you're fixed. You have a lease, you have a car note, you have a kid, you have some other thing that's attaches you to something. Divorce, so I don't have a wife. I've been able to avoid having a rugrat to drag with me. No, I don't like kids. That's what rugrat. The only real connection that I have is my mom. And all things being equal, whether I'm in DC, whether I'm in Maryland, whether I'm abroad, if anything happens, I still have to make transit to get back one way or the other. So from my point of view, whether you're 2 hours away or 10 hours away, it's not that much of a dramatic difference between those things. You're still away. I don't know. I have to make a choice. That choice will be made soon. Either way, that doesn't affect the show. The show still keeps ticking along. Anywhere I go, 7 a.m., Monday through Friday, Eastern Standard, regardless of where I am. So no, this is not going to change. It's not going to alter. I'm going to make a video about the chess thing, and I'm going to put that up. If anyone is interested in lessons, either learning how to play for their kids or something like that, let me know. Just hit me by email. I used to teach chess a few years ago, actually. I used to enjoy it. So I don't have any issue getting back into it. In fact, I even want to get back into it. Mimi, new member. Welcome to the Thomas family, Mimi. Welcome to the Thomas family. All right, I got to end this. I don't want my guests. I'm going to be a guest on their show. Wilmer Leon has invited me onto his show. I'm going to be on that show starting at 10:30. Wilmer always comes on my show. He's a really good friend of the show, and I want to do the same for him. So you guys have a fantastic day. You may see me later. We'll see. I'm moving today. I don't know where. I think it may be back to Richmond, but we'll see. Today's going to be my last day at this location, at this property. I have a lot to work out today, which is why I'm not in my typical suit. But either way, I would see you bright and early tomorrow morning. I don't know what my background is going to look like on Monday, but at the very least, I'll see you tomorrow morning from the same spot. You all have a fantastic day. Welcome to the new year, regardless of the damage and the chaos that's going on in the world. I will try to be a stable factor in discussing it. Have a good one, all. Small Thomas Morning Show, episode 69, first of the year. Signing off.